All right, now you're good.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and go. Kaylee's trying to get me started up. Hopefully everybody can hear me on the virtual land and you're all here. We're gonna talk about the ethics for public officials as designed in the state of Oregon. Hopefully this shows up. Is it working? I always like to start the afternoon off after lunch with a little cartoon. And it kind of falls into ethics and leads into public meetings. It says here, gentleman's looking into his, talking to his assistant over the PA system. It says, for the meeting, I need a copy of the agenda, the hidden agenda, and my own personal twisted agenda. So hopefully that doesn't go on in your district, but.
So you can just get maybe out and.
Hi there. God's talking to me again. Okay. Female God that time. All right, here we go. So where do we get our authority in the state of Oregon? It comes from the Oregon Revised Statute, chapters 244. In your handout, we have, may I grab yours there? In your handout, we have a copy of the Oregon Ethics Commission Guide for Public Officials. We have to make a copy for you. I hope this is the last time I see your copy, that it's so pretty and nice. In the future, it should be wrinkled. Most of what we're going to talk about today is in, all of what we're going to talk about it today is in here. And there's also some additional things in there. That's also available online. If you like reading it electronically, you go online and get it that way. So you can call up your phone at any time. The Oregon Government Ethics Commission, the OGEC, is the administrative agency that enforces Oregon ethics laws. It was created in 1974 by statewide ballot. So it's actually kind of a constitutional thing, you might say, following the Watergate scandal. Also in 1974, the ethics laws for public officials were enacted. And a lot of those we're going to go over. Now, I bring this up because I want you to remember a lot of these laws we're talking about were actually written in 1974. Some have been revised and some haven't. So some of them may not be as up to date. And when we start talking about monetary, you may look at that and go, well, that's a pretty low number, but it's still what we're dealing with. So when we get into what the monetary standards are, we're going to talk about 4 areas today. We're going to talk about economic conflicts of interest, using or having, trying to be influenced, undue influence, use of political office for financial gain, and public disclosure. All right. First of all, let's define who these laws apply to. I can pretty much tell you that everybody in this room, they apply to the public official, any person serving the state of Oregon or any of its political subdivisions or any other public body of the state as an elected official, an appointed official, an employee, an agent, irrespective of whether the person is compensated for those services. So in here we have staff, we have board members. You are all public officials. Kaylee back there works for SDAO. She is not a public official. However, Frank has made it very clear to all of us that work at SDAO that we follow a lot of the same rules that our members have to follow. So we set a good standard. So we kind of apply the things to ourselves, even though legally they don't apply to an organization like ours. But because if you think about it, where's all the revenue come from that basically promotes us, services SDAO? Comes from you, comes from our member districts. So a public official includes current board members, former board members, employees, volunteers, and candidates. Those of you that ran for office, you went and filed, and when you went and filed for the county, with the county for the first time, once you filed and paid your fee or turned in your signatures, ethics laws started applying to you during that period of time you ran for office. If you didn't get elected, then they no longer would apply. But during that period of time you ran, they did apply to you. So they do apply to candidates.
George, what is a board member?
I'm gonna share that with you because it's not only just a former board member, it's former staff. I know you're a career, captain, retired. You could have some confidential information from that career that if you tried to use that for financial gain would be unethical, okay? So it applies to relatives, but it applies to relatives in a very defined method or a fine group. It's not all your relatives. I'm sorry that I can't get at the right angle here without being off camera. It's probably good that I'm off camera, right? Yeah, they probably like it. All right, who are relatives when it comes to Oregon ethics? Spouse, parent, step-parent, child, sibling, step-sibling, son-in-law, daughter-in-law of the public official or the public official's spouse. Now also includes first person. We had a situation here with our governor a few years ago where they didn't feel the ethics laws applied to her. They do now, okay? The first person. Any individual for whom the public official has legal support obligation or who benefits financially from the public official employment with the public entity. My example here is that if you have a basement in your home and you rent that basement to somebody because it's a separate living quarters and they pay you rent, they're not a relative. But if it's your friend of your sons or daughters that lives there and you provide them with room and possibly board and you charge them no rent, while they're there, they're a relative. So these laws would apply to them. Okay, kind of get the difference? All right. Because we actually had that happen. Let's talk a little bit about employment. Can I hire my relative? The basic answer to that is no. A public official may not participate in employment decisions regarding relatives or household members, which includes interviews, debates, or discussion regarding the hiring or firing of relatives or household members. Does that mean your district cannot hire your relative? Does not mean that. Your relative can absolutely work for the district, okay? You just can't participate in the hiring process. You can't be involved in the interviews, the disclosure, the decision of any hiring of those relatives that we defined earlier. There are two exceptions though. There is the class exception. If a public official's action affects a class of people, including his or her relative, to the same degree, then the nepotism provisions are not violated. My example is this. Many years ago, we had a city councilman of the city of Portland who was a successful city councilman, did a lot of good things. He had a daughter that was with the Portland Police Bureau, worked for Portland Police Bureau. Came time to negotiate the contract with the union that represents the police bureau. He was criticized that he couldn't be on the negotiating team because he was looking out for who? His daughter, right? He challenged that, and it was proven that he was right, that she was in a 900-member union. Any negotiation he'd done on behalf of the city he was looking out for the city. No matter what happened with the union contract, might his daughter benefit from that? Yes, but she was one of 900, so she was in a class, okay? I think all of us in this room and the people out there in the virtual world can agree that when you got a group of 900, we get that that's a class. But what about your district? What about your district that has 2 or 3 union employees and one of them is a relative? Is that a class? I don't have an answer for you. One thing that I want to emphasize to you today, and I always emphasize, is ethic decisions are individual. If you feel some person, you read the ethics rules and you personally think, oh, wow, that, that's a problem for me. That's your decision. You could have a fellow employee or a fellow board member sitting right next to you and say, well, no, it's not a big deal to me. That's okay. You make your decision based on how you read the ethics, how maybe I read them. This person can make their decision how they read them. If one of you or both of you get challenged to the Ethics Commission, you're defending yourselves. It's a personal thing. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It's not a group thing. The only time the group gets involved is the Ethics Commission is also challenged with, you might say, policing, enforcing the executive session rules when it comes to executive sessions and board meetings, which Eileen will talk about later in our next session. They also enforce that. That's a group thing. That is the only ethics rule, you might say, that it impacts the group. The rest of them are all individual decisions. I get to decide whether I think it's ethical or not. You may challenge it, or somebody may file a complaint against me to the Ethics Commission, then I have to defend myself. You don't have to defend me. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So the one exception is class. The other exception is unpaid volunteers. Your relative, and you can be involved in a process. For example, fire districts, park districts have a lot of volunteers, libraries have volunteers. Hiring somebody in a volunteer position, if it's truly a volunteer position, you can be involved. You can go, hey, I want to hire my son to help in this, and we're not paying him anything. And if the district wants that, it's no big deal, okay? But be careful that you don't hire them into a volunteer position that really isn't a volunteer position. We have a lot of situations now where volunteers are actually getting compensated. They're called volunteers, but they're getting compensated. And I'm not looking forward to it, but I just predict that someday that will get challenged. That somebody will do something and simply go, wait a minute, that's truly not a volunteer position because they get their tuition paid for, or they get lunches, or they get something. See what I mean? So just be careful. Also, a public official may serve as a reference or provide a recommendation for a relative. If you currently are, or you normally are, a reference for some relative of yours and that person applies to your district and you show up as a reference on their resume, that's okay. As long as you're at the same level, but you're not still in the hiring process. You're just a quote reference, all right? That's an exception. When it comes to employment, can I supervise my relative? The standard answer is no, you cannot. Okay, public official may not directly supervise relatives or household members. In some of our larger organizations, this happens quite often in career positions. Mark worked for Tualatin Valley. It wasn't uncommon for there to be fathers, sons, brothers working in the same organization. The organization, that fire district, had to be careful that it didn't put them in supervisor positions over each other or over one of them. They had to make sure that that didn't happen, okay? Now, in an emergency situation, you got a relative, maybe two brothers, one working in this station, one working in this, and one's a supervisor and one isn't, and they respond on an emergency scene. Can they supervise emergency scene? Yes, because it's not an employment decision. They're not making a decision on whether they keep their job. They're not making a decision on their pay. It's an emergency operational type supervision. See the difference? But generally they aren't put on the same places together so that can happen. Financial gain. Ethics standards from a financial gain standpoint of public officials. The but-for is the test, the but-for test. A public official shall not use the official position to obtain financial gain or avoid a financial detriment that would not otherwise be available but for the public official's position. It applies to public official, a relative of the public official, or a business owned by the public official or the public official's relative. So when we get into conflict of interest, I'll use this as an example. Examples of unlawful gain. Using district equipment, or like as phones, computers, woodshop tools, vehicles, or storage space when the public does not have the same access to this equipment. I was actually have been involved with fire districts that build, when they build their fire stations, they built what's called a community room, something like this. They use it for a training room, they use it for district use, and they also make it available to the public for a fee. Firefighters, other members of the organization want to use the room. As long as they pay the fee, they're treated exactly the same. If they let them use it without the fee, that could create an ethics problem, okay? Unless, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in another situation, unless as part of the employment package that they're in, their benefit package, it stipulates they have the use of that room and puts a value on it. Then they could do it for less because it's part of their employment. They're actually still paying for it. Make sense? All right. Financial gain, accepting meals or other free stuff by public officials, not allowed to do that, okay? With some exceptions. Employer provided cell phones for personal use, frequent flyer miles, earned on official business discounts unless part of the compensation package. I get this question every time this comes up. I travel on behalf of my district. I put the airfare on my credit card and I earn miles for it. And then the district reimburses me. That can be a problem. What we recommend is you use the district's credit card. Let the district get the credit and them disperse it, okay? That's not otherwise available to anybody else to do that. Now, same thing applies here. If I'm your fire chief and I negotiate in my contract that I get a cell phone the district pays for, I get I'm going to use my own credit card, get the miles, then it's part of the compensation package. Okay? All right. What is not unlawful? All right, from financial gain standpoint, and I just get a big kick out of this one. Do you know do you staff people out here that your official salary and benefits is not an ethics violation? You can accept your pay. It's okay. Now, why that has to be said in our ethics rules, I don't know, but anyway, it is. Unsolicited honorarium under $50 related to private employment. Anything related to your private employment, if you volunteer with the district and it's not related to the district, that's okay. That's not a violation. Reimbursement for expenses. Most of you traveled here today to represent your district in this training. Your district can have a policy that says any travel for the district, you put in for miles, put in for meals, whatever it might be, if you stayed overnight here, and you can be reimbursed for that, and it's not an ethics violation. That didn't used to be the case. That actually was changed with the new rules in the last 20 years. Okay? Unsolicited awards for professional achievement. If you have a profession outside of where you work with the district, unsolicited, they give you some recognition, even with the district. They look at you and they go, hey, you're the best water provider we've ever been associated with. And they want to recognize you. It's okay as long as you didn't put in for it, as long as you didn't solicit it. Okay? Gifts under $50 from a source without an administrative or financial interest in the public official or the entity he or she represents. So gifts under $50 from a source without an administrative financial gain, financial interest in your district. The $50, I would say it's $49.99. It's easier for me to remember. Okay, I'm not going to make any mistakes. But for anything under 50 bucks. All right. Gifts. A public official or a relative, what is a gift? Okay. A public official or a relative of a business, of a public official, may not receive a gift valued at greater than $50 from someone with a legislative or administrative interest in the public body. This is underlined. Eileen always underlines that for me, and I always want to emphasize it. It's $50, but remember, we're talking about somebody that has an interest in your district. All right, what's a gift? Something given to a public official or relative of the public official when there is no payment or payment is for a discounted price and the opportunity gift is not available to others who are not public officials on the same terms and conditions. $50 applies here, but also that's just defining the gift. Now, here's the real thing that you need help with, or I need help with. What is a legislative or administrative interest? What is that? With respect to your public body, does the giver, if somebody's trying to give you a gift, take you to a game, do something for you, can they sell your district things? Can they submit bids to you to do work? Do they get a license or permit from you? Do you issue permits or licenses? Are they advocating you to some kind of legislative outcome? Are they trying to get you to vote in a certain way? Are they trying to get impact an employment decision? Either they're trying to get hired or trying to get somebody hired to your district. That group, those people have a legislative or administrative interest in your district, and you need to be careful about how they may be trying to influence you. Because not only are you possibly going to get called to the Ethics Commission, but they could get called to the Ethics Commission. What are some permissible gifts? Gifts of any value if the giver does not have an administrative or legislative interest in the public body. Grandma can still give you a Christmas present. Okay, you can accept a gift from your neighbor if they don't have a legislative or administrative interest. It's okay. Okay, so that's still permitted. If the gift is $50 or less from a single source, even if they have a legislative or administrative interest, once a year you can accept a gift from them. I had an interesting question come up yesterday that went on. She says, we're actually looking at doing some payroll changes and getting our payroll done by a vendor, a professional company. And this company has contacted our CFO and has sent them a nice wine basket. And I said, whoa, was that like Scappoose wine or was it really nice wine? Okay. Well, what was the value? What are you laughing at? Hey, I got a vineyard. Come on now. It's a little sweet, but anyway. So if it's under, if it's of any value, and they didn't have a legislative administrative interest, they weren't a vendor for payroll, then it's okay. But if they are, the $50 applies. And it's once a year. That's an annual amount from that vendor. Okay, so you got to watch what the value is. Gifts that bear no relation to the person's public position. I talked about this earlier. You can accept gifts, they're not related to the district.
It was a gift.
Right. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I think she'd asked the question.
All right, go.
Is a gift different than a donation?
Maybe. Give me an example.
Our fire district,
Oh, yeah,
everybody wants to bring us gifts.
absolutely. I used to love it. We used to get leftover pizza from Domino's. They don't get that anymore. Okay,
We have coffee, people that bring us coffee,
okay.
like every Friday.
So is it my wife showing up on Friday with coffee? Or is it a vendor?
It's, just a local shop,
It's a local shop.
bring the firefighters coffee.
Okay, so let's walk through this. Think about it from this standpoint. When you look at that local shop, are they trying to get the district's business? Or are they actually,
I mean, if there's a fire, we're obviously responding.
no. I don't mean, I'm not trying to get you to come, I'm not trying to get you to put my fire on. You're coming to that.
I mean,
But-
we buy our coffee because it's.
Okay, but is there more than one coffee shop in town? Okay, do you buy from both? Okay. You just have to be careful, because say that you only bought, let's say that this coffee shop, but I'll even give names. Let's say your local Starbucks is giving you coffee every Friday, and your local Dutch Brothers is not. And now you have a big fire and you only go to Starbucks. That's a problem. Okay, but if you go to both, probably don't have a problem. But you gotta be careful, because if that coffee or it adds up to more than $50, then they could be trying to influence you. And just a minute, just a minute. And when Dutch Brothers writes to the Ethics Commission, you could be embarrassed. Just say it. Kaylee. Okay, well, let me take this gentleman, then we'll go online. Go.
Define, how do you define a gift? Because something could be a service that you provide, but how do you define a gift that you can go ahead, and give a monetary, Jeff, you got a slide for it somewhere.
Well, he did.
I did. Help me, Kaylee, help me. Oh, I see it. I gotta get this thing back.
Okay, you had a slide there. Did I jump again?
No. Help me get it back. I gotta get my glasses lined back up. We defined what a gift is. It's something of value that somebody's giving to you. So,
Right, but how do you define the cost of that? I mean, how do you determine what the value of that is for the $50 thing?
yeah,
How do you define the value of it, especially if it's like a service or something?
I'm not sure what you mean by a service. They're gonna come in and massage your feet.
Does
I
it
mean, what?
I would charge money for, but I don't really charge you. I mean, I don't know.
A
So,
constituent offers to come rehang your gutters.
Yeah. A constituent that has no legislative or administrative interest in your district, I don't have a problem with. But if it's a local gutter guy and eventually he's gonna want to sell me gutters, now we got a problem. Okay,
so how do you determine the value of that? I mean, you'd have to have it nailed down as far as the hours and stuff like that, or?
yeah.
Yeah, that's the, someone was trying to come up with that $50 thing.
Today, when it comes to services, it's pretty easy. Yeah, that's worth over $50.
You just assume it's over 50.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I have a thing about when it comes to ethics. If you gotta ask me the question, don't do it.
Okay.
Because it's individual. Does that make sense?
So just assume it's over 50.
Right. Let me get the ones online and I'll get to you. Okay, Kaylee, go.
I'm not about gifts. They've gone back a little bit.
That's okay.
So the first one is, can a retired alumni, no longer board member, be paid as a consultant or part-time contractor to provide services to the district?
Can a former board member who is a consultant be hired by the board? As long as it's done openly and publicly, yes. They have no there's no reason, the fact that they're a board member doesn't exclude them from being a private contractor. Is that fair? Fair? Go.
And the district utility workers use the snowplow to clear driveways for employees and board members to attend work and meetings.
Okay. Let me do it this way. Can I stand before the Ethics Commission and defend plowing an essential employee's driveway? Probably. Can I defend plowing a board member who comes once a month? That one might be hard. But if I got an essential employee, and one of the ways I'm gonna get that person to work is to, once a year or once every 5 years, plow their driveway, probably gonna be okay. See what I mean? It's gotta be. Now, my buddy over here with a good hairstyle like me, he may look at that and go, George, I'm not doing it. You know what? Great. That's okay. He made his ethical decision. I made mine. Don't base your decision on whether I think it's okay. Base it on whether you think it's okay. Is that fair? Come on, Mr. Ernst, don't look at me like that. All right, give me another question.
Our campaign donations separated from the gifts rule. The example is, it seems to me that this would be influencing the outcome of the public official on decision or ordinance.
That's way deeper question than I can handle, okay? You bet. Do campaign contributions influence them? I can't imagine they don't. That's not, campaign funds are held in different light than what we're talking about. And I'll leave that to Eileen or to the campaign people. Go.
So we have someone online, Jan.
Jan, are you there?
So,
How come we can't get Jan? But God every once in a while talks to me. Where am I at here in this? Now that I'm back.
got one more in the chat. If a board member of districts did a lot of volunteer work for another district, is it okay for the district to give $70 gift card to that volunteer? Districts do not interact with any business.
Okay, what I heard was a district member does some work for another district and that district wants to give that person a $70 gift card. Probably fine. That's not, that person doesn't have a legislative administrative interest in that district. Just because they're a volunteer for you doesn't take away the fact that they're a citizen or a private contractor or, it's not related. I'm not sure I understand that one completely, but I'm saying, yeah, probably not a problem. Any more? Not at the moment. All right, we got some ethical people out there. All right. Another form of gifts, informational or program material, publication or subscriptions related to recipients' performance and official duties. You came today, we give you handouts. Somebody might say this is worth more than $50 or something. That's part of your job, is to have that information available to you. It's incidental to it, okay? Reasonable expenses paid by the public or nonprofit entity for attendance of the convention, fact-finding mission, or trip, conference, or other meeting, if the public official is scheduled to deliver a speech, make a presentation, participate in a panel, or represent the government entity. Whew. That's permissible. Any expenses for that? Coming today, going to the conference in a few weeks here in Salem. If you're representing your district, it's permissible, okay? Unsolicited awards of appreciation with a resale value of less than $25. I get a big kick out of this one. One of the things listed there is engraved plaques. So what that's really saying is you can get a plaque. Just can't be a very nice plaque. Okay? It's silly. This is what I'm saying about 1974 to 2022. This maybe needs to be updated, okay? Unsolicited honorarium less than $50. Reasonable expenses provided to the public official, relatives, or staff when the public official is representing the public entity or speaking in an official capacity. It used to be, if any of you that would have traveled today to get here and spent the night, you brought your spouse with your significant other, whatever, it used to be that any expenses incurred by them, if there was an upcharge on your room, that had to be paid by you, not by the district. That no longer applies today. That did get updated. And so you can actually travel with your spouse if there's an upcharge, which I don't think they have anymore. The district can pay that. And then you can even trade if your district has a policy permitting it, they can even pay their travel expenses. Okay. It's not done by a lot of districts, but it is okay. Here's something about officials legal expense trust fund. Anybody here have one of those? I've never met anybody that has one of those. But if you do, contributions that are permitted. Okay. All right. Is entertainment a gift? Let's get back to the gift thing. Is entertainment a gift? Yes, it is. Entertainment gifts include invitations to events or activities put on for recreation or amusement. That is concert, play, sporting events. That is a gift. The $50 thing applies. If provided by someone with a legislative administrative interest in public bodies, the $50 applies. I jumped the gun on that. I should have read one more sentence. Okay, so where's my gift question? There's some definition of gifts. Did you have a question with that?
Yeah, my understanding. Entertainment that's part of a convention or something where it's generally available to all of the attendees, but not by.
It's incidental. I got a slide coming on that, but yes. But here's one that this caused me pause. Okay, and here's what caused me pause. If I would have got a phone call from my daughter, and she says, "Hey, Kelly's parents want to take me to the Seattle Seahawks game, on Sunday. Can I go?" What would be my automatic reaction?
Sure.
Can I go?
Oh.
Is there room for me? No, but yeah, probably yes, right? Well, what if Kelly's parents own the local company that sells fire engines and I'm the local fire chief? Now what? Okay, now it's a problem. She's my daughter, okay? The $50 applies. What's the right thing for me to do? No. Call the parents and go, "Hey, well, thank you for inviting my daughter. I'd love to have you go. May I ask you what the cost of that ticket is?" It's $100. Great. She'll bring $50 with her to help pay for that ticket. Let's have a nice day. It protects them and me. See what I mean? Now, the reason I give that example is I'm not so sure I would have thought of that. I had to take an ethics class and have the ethics instructor give her scenario that was similar to that. And I had to sit there like you and go, would I have thought of that? Or would I just said, dang it, I wish I'd have got to go. Okay. So that's why I shared it with you. Ethics, when it comes to questions about you being influenced, is your decision to make. Not and when we get into the discussion here a little bit about conflict of interest, I had a board member sit right where you're sitting. "Well, George, I have an obligation to my fellow board member to tell them they've got a conflict." And my answer was, absolutely. If you feel they have a conflict, just say, "Hey, I feel you have a conflict," and then be done with it. You've cleared your mind. You shared with them, you think it's a conflict. Don't argue with them about it. It's not your argument. It's their argument, and who? Person in the mirror. And if they get called the ethics commission, then they get to argue their point. See what I'm saying there? Don't be the ethics police for your board or your staff. Inform them, train them, but it's individual. All right. Is entertainment again? We said it was. $50 applies. What about meals and beverages? We're going to get the answer now. Food and beverages consumed in the presence of the buyer is subject to the $50. So they want to take you to lunch, take you to dinner, $50 works, okay? However, you may accept food and beverages at a reception when it is incidental part of the reception. A vendor, that fire apparatus vendor, is at a conference and he invites you to a hospitality and there's 400 people in there, 100 people in there, 50 people in there from all over. It's incident and it's part of the conference. That's SDAO. We've been known to have hospitality rooms. Not like we used to, but we've been known. You can come. We have an administrative and financial interest in your district. We do, okay? Pretty obvious. You can come because it's incidental to it. It's part of the conference, part of the convention, whatever. Also, food and beverage consumed in an event when the public official represents the public entity is not a gift. And I kind of ran those two together. That help you with your, is that it or not it?
Yeah.
That's it. All right. All right, when it comes to undue influence, what a public official may not do. You may not solicit or accept the offer, pledge, or promise of future employment based on any understanding that a vote, official action, or judgment will be influenced by the offer. I'm not going to get any, what about campaign funds here? That's nothing to do with, this is just somebody actually coming after you saying, listen, I want to do something for you. I want you to, I will do this for you if you do this. Use or attempt to use confidential information gained through their position as a public official for financial gain. Mark and I are retired out of the fire service. We may or may not have confidential information that maybe would be of value to somebody. If we try to sell it or try to influence something, that's an ethics violation. It also may be criminal, but it's definitely an ethics violation. It applies to us. Directly receive a beneficial interest in a contract for which the authorized, which they authorize for 2 years following the contract's authorization. You negotiate a contract, staff members. You negotiate a contract. It's a big construction project. It's switching the meters out of the city of Portland. Okay, this actually happened. The gentleman that was in charge of replacing all the, they did away with all the parking meters and they put those little green boxes up. You put your card in, put a sticker on your window. You seen those? The guy that negotiated that contract quit the city and went to work for that company. That was an ethics violation. He got caught, made the front page of the Oregon. Okay. Yeah, dumb. Solicitor accept an offer, pledge, or promise or future employment. We talked about that. User attempt to use confidential information. We talked about that. This is the one that's got the dual things. I keep trying to get rid of this thing. All right. Conflict of interest. Congratulations. You are a public official in the state of Oregon. Conflict of interest rules are straightforward and there's only 2 of them. You don't have to get very complicated. The first one is, do you have a potential conflict of interest? A potential conflict of interest, you could result in you getting financial gain or avoidance of a financial detriment. If you think you may have a conflict, disclose to the record. You can still, board members, you can still discuss it and you can still vote. My example I use is this. What's your first name? Wendy? Oh, I got a daughter named Wendy. We're going with that one. Wendy's husband, Wendy serves on a board. She's a board member. Wendy's husband is a local plumber. The district where she's a board member at, she's sitting in a board meeting, the CEO comes in and says, hey, one of the things I need to talk to the board about is I want to go out and get bids to repair the plumbing in these facilities because we're having some plumbing issues in this region, this area with our facilities. She's sitting there going, wait a minute, my husband's a plumber. He's got a company. He may want to bid on that. She's got a potential conflict of interest. She declares it. Hey, I've got a potential conflict. She can discuss it and she can vote. Because what is she helping decide? Whether the general manager over here could go out and get the bids. She's not awarding any bids. She's just saying, me and the other board members agree, you go forward and do it. Fair? Potential conflict of interest. She declared it, it's put in the minutes, she can discuss and she voted. That happens. Where's my general managers here? Out the door they go. 2 months later, they come back and they have 5 bids for this project. Let's say it's $50,000 project. She's sitting there when this subject comes up, just this subject, not the entire meeting. I've had people say, well, she can't be at the meeting. Yes, she can. She's only got one thing there she's got a conflict on. Now she knows her husband has bid on the job. When that comes up, what does she have? An actual conflict of interest. It will result in financial gain or avoidance of a financial detriment. She's going to disclose to the record. She's going to abstain from discussion and she's not going to vote. So she's going to say, hey, my husband, you're going to see my husband's company's bid on this. I'm going to abstain from this. It's put down in the minutes, but she's abstained. She can sit there, okay? But she can't discuss it. She can't vote unless unless action cannot be taken without the members' vote. Now, my advice to her, because it's a 5-member board, a 7-member board, you do everything you can possibly do not to have to get involved in this because you're going to get criticized, okay? So don't. But let's say it's a 3-person irrigation district board. And oh, by the way, her and her husband both serve on the board. Who's conflicted now? Come on now, I just give you the class. Both, right? Neither one can discuss or vote, right? It's all falls on you. Can't make a decision with just one vote, gotta have 2. One of them can come back and vote, can't discuss. That's a very simple and diluted, exaggerated example, but you get what I'm saying. Should never happen, but on some of the reason this has to be here is because of the makeup of some of our boards. Because you know where Deadwood Swiss Home is? It's in the Coast Range, down little Central Oregon Coast Range. Well, if you live in Deadwood Swiss Home, you are related. Okay. And you serve on the fire district, the water district, and the park and rec district, and you have to. You serve on all the different districts, so God bless them, love them. But this is there for people. That sometimes you got to come back and vote. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about you made a boo-boo and you end up in front of the Ethics Commission and you get fined. Those fines can go up to $5,000 and they are personal. Your insurance company can't pay them. Your district can't pay them. They are personal. It comes out of your pocket. Okay. Ethics violations only. I'm only talking ethics here, not liability. We'll get into that later. Just ethics. Penalty for violation of the executive session law. Remember I told you this is the one thing they police, you might say, that's a group thing. If you make a decision to go into executive session, it was wrong, you shouldn't have done it, you misused it, somebody complained, they can fine you $1,000 as a group, but it's excused if the decision is made relying on the advice of public bodies and legal counsel. Eileen or somebody like her advised you, it's their battle, not yours. They'll work it out with them. They're not going to hold you if you can prove you relied on them. Okay. In addition, if a public official's financial benefit, if you financially benefited, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission can impose a civil penalty in the amount equal to twice the amount the public official realized as a result of the violation. If you gained financially from a decision you made and you're called the Ethics Commission, it was inappropriate, you can be fined double of what you gained if you're found guilty. Okay. No penalty if official or candidate relied in good faith on the ethics manual. We give you a copy of the ethics manual. If you relied in good faith, for heaven's sakes, don't try to defend yourself if your ethics manual looks like this. It better be wrinkled up and written on and highlighted that you actually relied on it. Okay. Prevailing party. Now, let's say that you're called to the commission, you defend yourself and you win. You were right. They agree with you. Okay. You prevail. You may file a petition with the Marion County Circuit Court seeking attorney fees, which the court may award if the award was not substantially justified or other circumstances make the award unjust. Here's the kicker. And provided the funds are available to the commission. So if they've got the money, they'll pay your legal fees. Why do I think that's an out clause right there? Okay, I'm a little skeptical of that. All right. As we wrap up the ethics session here after lunch, I want to quickly, thanks to Eileen, go over some things that have changed in the last couple of years. There's 2 laws specifically that they've updated in the ethics. Senate Bill 61 passed in 2021 legislature. It authorizes the Ethics Commission to issue written opinions on violations of executive session laws. The former statute limited written opinions to violations described in chapters 244. But now if they rule on an executive session, you can actually go online and read their opinion on why they ruled the way they ruled. And that didn't used to exist. Okay. Senate Bill 62 prohibits a public official from requesting or receiving public money pay penalty for ethics violations. People that got found guilty before were basically appealing to their supporters to help pay their fine. Yeah, you can't do that. It's you. It's you. Okay. Okay. Now, any questions?
I want to have a question on that. Now, this goes back to the idea that in order to have, you have a quorum, and then because of conflict of interest, some people say, gee, I can't do it, then you lose the quorum, so they have to, obviously have to vote. So would it be appropriate then for them to just, can they abstain and still be voting, considered voting? In other words, there's a needed quorum, and so you have 5 people, and there's, or say you have 3 people as the quorum, but then 2 of the people have a conflict of interest, and so they say, well, gee, I can't vote on this resolution or whatever because I have a conflict of interest. But then you don't have a quorum, so you want to have the quorum, but then, so they need to vote, right, in order to deal with it, make the resolution or to talk about the resolution passing.
Okay, I'm gonna explain it my way, okay? The only time a person has an actual conflict of interest, they can only come back and vote. They can't discuss. And they can only come back for the purposes of getting a decision made.
Right. So then if on the decision, could you abstain and still be considered voting?
Declaring a conflict of interest, actual conflict of interest is an abstention.
Okay.
That's what that is.
Oh, okay.
That's really the only abstention that I can tolerate. You heard Eileen talk about him earlier. I have a bigger soapbox than her when it comes to that.
Okay.
I think as an elected official, you have an obligation to vote.
Okay. So in other words, they would have to say yes or no on what the resolution, even though it might have a conflict of interest, but because they have to have the form.
Okay, help me out, folks. Have I answered that?
I think so.
Okay, all right. Okay, go ahead. Oh, we got one over here.
I have a question about gifts, going back to that. So you have, I'll just use the meter example, a meter vendor brings lunch for your whole staff.
Right,
Does that 3, 4, 5 times a year. So each person isn't getting or may get up to $50 a
Right.
year. Is that acceptable?
yep,
It's when they exceed $50 per person,
Right.
that's when the issue is.
Right. And I would be what I would share with that vendor, if they were my vendor coming to me, I would go, you know, hey, Charlie, you're putting us in a bad spot here by doing this more than once or twice a year. You know, we love you, man, but let's not have vendor C calling the ethics commission and you and I are standing in there, can't explain ourselves. Okay. All right, Kaylee.
What if a board member sits on another board that has business that's in front of the first board?
I know this question. I've had this question.
And the board member is compensated by the other board.
Ooh, it's a twist. Okay, I don't know how the board member would get compensated by the other board except for up to the $50 that they're all allowed to get.
Or is it pay you to be on board?
Very specific. I think it's only people's utility districts, the ones that do that. That's the only ones I'm aware of. And they have very specific rules that govern them. So some of this ethics stuff, they're already unethical. No, I'm not saying our PUDs are, but they're permitted under their established, they're permitted under their, the ORS that allowed them to get going, gave them, they had better lobbyists than you did. Okay, so they got more freedom. Okay, so is that what we're talking about? If we're talking about people's utility district, you know, and how those board members are treated compared to you, I don't know that I'm gonna go there because the normal example I've been given is you got a fire district negotiating with the school district over something, and you got a board member that could serve on both, okay, or husband and wife. And is there a conflict of interest? And my answer is, unless they personally benefit from it, personally, it's not a conflict of interest. But in this case, where you are compensated, you're actually an employee of the district. And if that decision you're going to make is going to increase your pay, you have a conflict of interest. Or if it's going to drop your pay, you got a conflict of interest. But just the fact that you serve on the boards, maybe husband and wife or brothers, probably not. See what I'm saying? But don't rely on me. I'm a practitioner. I'm not an attorney. Okay, and I definitely don't sit on the ethics commission. I'd love to, though. That would be interesting, man. Be so interesting. All right, any other questions on ethics? One more.
What if a board member sells the same item at a separate company?
What if a board member,
I think it might be something that. The question isn't super clear to me, but maybe
let me read it.
if the board, what if the board member sells something this at the separate company?
What if a board member sells something the same? Oh, so a board member is a vendor for a product that the district might want to buy?
Yeah.
And he or she's been known to sell it to other districts? There's a conflict. Yeah, because he or she will benefit. So that's an actual conflict. Okay, that's it? Whew. That was good. Those are tougher questions than I've had recently. I usually skate through this thing. All right. We are on no, we're not on a break. We're not on a break. I always get confused with, I give the break in the morning, I don't give the break in the afternoon. We're gonna bring Eileen back, okay? And the restrooms work. We have water. I mean, we're having a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Hi, everybody. Ooh, it's nice to sit on the patio and just look out at the vineyard, isn't it? I didn't want to come back, but here I am. I think we should all go wine tasting when this is over.
There you go.
All right. Okay, we're gonna talk about public meetings next. And for the rest of the afternoon, our topics are, we have public meetings. We'll take another short break where you can use the bathrooms. And then we will come back and we'll do public records, rapid fire, and then we have a little bit of an update on some legislative changes and a little bit of risk management stuff, and then we will be done. Okay, so we're getting into the home stretch. So let's talk about public meetings. This one is often the most fun to teach for me, just because everybody goes through this and everybody's got a story to tell, so that the exchange can be the best part of this. But we're going to walk through the basics of public meetings. Excuse me. We're going to talk about legal requirements. We'll talk about notice. We'll talk about executive sessions. Okay. We'll also include in that minutes and a couple other things. Okay. Interesting. That one is different from this one. I'll look at this one. This is what I want. Okay, we're talking about public meetings. Oregon is big on transparency. I don't know how it is in other states. I only practice in Oregon, but Oregon favors transparency in almost everything. Contracting, public contracts, public records, public meetings. And public meetings are probably the most transparency-oriented things. The whole point of them is to be as transparent as possible. So the Oregon statutory policy for public meetings says, the Oregon form of government requires an informed public aware of the deliberations and decisions of governing bodies and the information upon which such decisions were made. It is the intent of the public meetings law that decisions of governing bodies be arrived at openly. I have heard public meetings in the Oregon referred to as, well, hang on. Well, I'm going to come back later. I'm going to distract us. Okay, so that's the Oregon statutory policy. The whole point is to do it as openly as possible. The purposes of the law are to open meetings of governing bodies to the public, to give notice of the time and place of the meetings, to make them accessible to those wishing to attend. And that's it. There is no requirement to let the public talk. That comes as news to some people, including members of your public, I'm not saying you should not listen to the people who attend your meetings. You should, if you can, and if it's appropriate. But what the public is allowed to do at your public meetings, the public meeting is a business meeting of the board. Okay, it is not a public meeting. It's not a meeting for the public. The public is allowed to attend. They're allowed to listen. Okay, that's their right, and then don't let them tell you otherwise. Because anybody here have that person who comes to your meeting, or persons who it's their meeting and they're going to be heard? Well, this is what the public meetings law requires you to do. Okay, so what I want you to take away from this is, it is a business meeting of the board. It's incumbent upon the board to make sure that it is run in a business-like fashion, and do your best to not get derailed by members of the public who want to come and talk about whatever they have in mind. If the board wants to take public input, and it is a good idea to do that, but you should be managing it in a proactive way, meaning that you decide there should be, maybe something on your your agenda that says public comment. And then the board can decide who gets to speak about what. It'll give everybody an equal shot at talking. They, give them one opportunity to talk. Everybody gets the same amount of time to talk. I don't recommend, if you can avoid it, getting in, if you're sitting at the dais as the board member and the members of the audience are shouting questions at you, I don't recommend a back and forth there. That can get out of control pretty quickly. But for the most part, you hear what people have to say, and that's all you have to do, okay? There's a difference, however, if what you're holding is a public hearing. You can have a public hearing anytime you want to, but there are some times when you're required to have a public hearing. Example, anybody know an obvious example that we?
Budget.
Exactly, budget hearings, okay? And like when you adopt an ordinance, you're supposed to have a hearing, and there are certain other times when you have to have a hearing. If the law requires you to have a hearing, then you have to hear people. But that means you are holding it for the purpose of taking public input, but you, again, stay in control of that process. You want somebody to basically, be kind of the facilitator, and you want to make sure that everybody speaks in a certain, limited amount of time, and everybody gets a chance to talk, et cetera. And if it gets ugly, then you terminate the meeting. Don't ever get in a position where anybody is in danger. If people start threatening harm or trying to engage in harm, then terminate the meeting and pick it up later. It's just not worth it to stay. Don't touch anybody ever for anything, if you can avoid it. Okay. What is a public meeting? So this is how the statute defines it. Any meeting where a quorum of the decision-making body, that's the board, is present and is discussing or deliberating toward a matter of business is a public meeting. Notice there's two things. Quorum, what's a quorum? Majority. We covered that one. Discussing or deliberating toward a matter of business. Okay, so you got those two things, quorum and discussing or deliberating toward a matter of business. And that's interpreted pretty broadly. I mean, if it has anything whatsoever to do with the district's business, you can assume that it falls into that definition. There also is a requirement that if you are creating a body that exists to advise a public body, come back and give advice on something, advisory committees, advisory boards, they are also subject to these laws. So they are treated as a separate governing entity, and they're going to be subject to these laws. Yeah. Okay. Which of the following is allowed at a public meeting? Choose all that apply. A, shouting at each other. B, meeting outside the district. C, meeting on the second floor of a building with no elevator. D, holding the meeting when no notice was given. Or E, smoking.
This is allowed. Shouting at each other. Hey,
Maybe not. Maybe under certain circumstances.
B.
B, all this thinking going on. You're actually, there's an energy. We were joking about this at the lot when we did this yesterday. Where we were.
is allowed.
Newport. There's a feeling in the group when there is we're thinking about this, give us a minute energy. And then there's please just get this over with and tell us the answer. Sometimes it's, sometimes it shifts in mid thought processes. But many of you were actually thinking about it. So thank you. For those who said A, that is the correct answer. And I'm not telling you it's a good idea to shout at each other. However, it is not illegal to shout at each other. Being a jerk is not against the law, okay, as much as we'd like it to be sometimes. So the whole point is the board is talking to each other and passions run high, and if voices get elevated, that's all. It's allowed. It's not against the law. Do I recommend it? No. Does it make you look dumb? Yes. Does it get you into the newspapers? Yes, and not in a good way. So of all of the rest of these, though, we'll just walk through them. Meeting outside the district. When it is feasible to do so, you are required to meet within the geographic boundaries of your district, okay? So, and most of you are going to do that. Occasionally, you can go outside of that for certain circumstances. For example, had a soil and water conservation district client that was kind of in Eastern Oregon. There was soil and there was water, but there wasn't a lot in the way of buildings. So they needed a meeting space. They didn't have one, so they made an arrangement with like the local fire district, which was outside their area but nearby, to have their meetings there. And that's okay to do that because it was feasible to do it that way. They just have to make sure in your meeting notice that it's clear where the meetings are happening, okay? Similarly, occasionally you might have like a joint meeting somewhere, or we're going to go on a site visit and have our meeting there or something like that. That's okay periodically as well. your meeting notice, we'll talk about notice, it has to be clear that that's what you're doing. And again, it has to be, within the intent of the law. You can't just occasionally have your meeting in, Maui, that you can't do that. As much as the house, however fun that might be. So, meet within the geographical boundaries of your district. What are we getting at with C? Accessibility, exactly. There is within the public meetings law a requirement that it must be accessible to the disabled. That has since been eclipsed in a big way by the ADA. Every public building is supposed to be accommodating to those with disabilities. Okay, reasonable accommodations is a standard. There's still a client, haven't heard from in a while, which makes me nervous. It's either going very well or they are not getting help when they need it. But they do meet on the second floor of a building with no elevator, and that they're in a part of the state that has a lot of historic buildings. Cool part of the state, buildings that date from 1870, and they're really neat. And they have a building in town that it's currently a museum. I don't know what it was originally, but it's now a museum. And the bottom is a museum, and there's a second floor that has a meeting room, and they meet in the meeting room, right? Pardon me?
Sounds like Echo.
It's not, but you can relate. It's not an unusual situation, okay? And it's a cool meeting room, okay? They meet there. And I told them, I said, you guys, you can't meet on the second floor. There's no elevator. It's a historic building, so it's exempt from the ADA requirements. So basically, that's what I told them, and they said, no one in wheelchairs comes to our meetings. Not surprised by that. So anyway, they're still doing it. All I can do is advise. That's what I do. But you're supposed to be meeting in a building that is either accessible or can be with reasonable accommodation. Okay, that's the standard of the ADA. Yes.
With the advent of remote meeting technology, this one of something.
Well, that's a good question. We're going to talk a little bit more about remote access, and that's an interesting question. I think it will stay this way because I think for as long as people are in a physical space, I mean, if we go to hybrid meetings, this will stay the law. If we eventually go to all virtual, then probably it won't. But the idea here is whatever facility you are in has to be accessible. Okay, so the remote option could be a form of reasonable accommodation, maybe, but we'll talk about that as well. So if that's an acceptable form, if they want to be there in person, you have to figure out a way to get them so they could be there in person. And we'll talk a bit, and that's, as we'll talk about in a couple different contexts. The law is always trying to catch up with technology. It's trying to catch up with social issues. It's a little slow in the sausage making process. But in this case, that's the standard, okay? Accessible, remember that was making meetings accessible to those who wish to attend. That's what that's about. Holding a meeting when no notice was given. We're going to talk about notice and how to do that properly, but a public meeting requires public notice, okay? Smoking is actually, these laws were along with the ethics laws. Can you imagine what was going on politically that made Oregon want to adopt a bunch of transparency laws in the 70s? I remember, and I'm not that old. So anyway, when these laws were adopted in given in their current form in the early 70s, like 72 to 4, around in there. Both, I'm holding this book because I'm going to talk about it in a minute. You're like, why is she holding that book? The public meetings and records laws were all developed around the same time. And that was in the early 70s. And at the time they were adopted, and this is still on the books, there was a prohibition against smoking in a public meeting room. The way it reads is something like smoking a smoking instrument. So they were kind of trying to capture, cigars, cigarettes, pipes. Now it would include, bongs, whatever else might be a smoking instrument. That's still on the books, and there's still a penalty. This has since been eclipsed by the statewide prohibition on smoking in public buildings, right? You can't smoke anyway. But there's still a little law on the books that is hung around. Does anybody know from a historically interesting factoid what the penalty is? It hasn't changed since these were adopted in early 70s. Take a guess. What do you think would have been considered a reasonable fine?
$5.
You're not far off.
$100.
$10. Yeah, it's still there. It's interesting to me. Before the law became, as aggressive as it is, I think that there were people who were kind of like, well, okay, if you're a diehard smoker, $10 is like, all right, fair enough. So anyway, no smoking, all of these are, all of these are not allowed at a public meeting, but you can shout at each other if you really must, but please try not to do that. For a 7-member board, which is not a public meeting, A, 3 members call a 4th one on the phone to discuss firing the manager. B, 4 members go fishing together. C, the chair sends a group email to the rest of the board to ask how they plan to vote at next week's board meeting. And D, 5 members attend a work session at the home of the prayer to hammer out some personnel policies. Which of those are not public meetings?
B.
If business is not discussed.
B. Confident Bs.
C.
Anybody have a different C?
Oh, I just was in trouble. I'm gonna show you this real quick.
Think of none of those as a public meeting? Oh, yeah.
Where's the public in any?
Yeah, right.
Generally, at the public, you just have to have a majority.
Yeah.
That's the problem. If there's a quorum, it
Yeah.
should be noticed as a public.
Yeah, whether or not the public is there is beside the point. Okay, what we're talking about now is how are we defining public meeting? All right? So let's just walk through these. 7-member board, what's a quorum for a 7-member board? 4. Remember, we have 2 things that have to happen for it to qualify as a public meeting. We have a quorum, and they're discussing or deliberating toward a matter of district business. So quorum is 4. In this situation, 3 of them are there. They're calling the 4th one on the phone. Do they have a quorum?
Yes.
Yes, and that again is thrown in, doesn't matter that they're on the phone, okay? That is 4 people. Are they discussing or deliberating toward a matter of district business? Yes, they are. Okay, so that is a public meeting and it has to be treated accordingly, which we're going to talk about. In this one, 4 members go fishing together. Do we have a quorum? Yep.
Yes.
Are they discussing or deliberating toward a matter of district business?
No.
Presumably not, if they're going fishing. And I always feel like I want to say that if your board likes each other well enough to hang out socially, you are way ahead of a lot of boards, okay? And I get the question, well, we can't all go to the same Christmas party then, can we? And of course you can. As if, you just have to be careful that if a quorum is present, you got to avoid that. You know, the other thing you have in common, in addition to maybe fishing or celebrating Christmas, is that you are all on the same board together, right? So it's very natural, deliberately or not, to be like, oh, you know, what do you think about that meeting we had? And how about that person that talked about whatever? And at that point, you've then morphed into public meetings land, okay? So you have to be aware that the topics that are part of your conversation can determine whether you're having a meeting or not, all right? So if a quorum is present, then just be careful what you talk about. This is particularly sticky for 3-member boards. And there are a few. Fort Road districts are the ones that come to mind. I think there are a couple of others that have 3-member districts. And so any 2 of them in a room can't talk to each other about district business at all. They have to do it always in a meeting. So that's a particular challenge. But anyway, okay, so most of you picked up on that. All right, in this scenario, the chair sends a group email to the rest of the board to ask how they plan to vote at next week's meeting. So we got the chair plus the rest of the board, which is 6 more people. So do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Yes. Are they discussing or deliberating toward a matter of district business?
Yes.
Does it matter that it's being done by email?
Yes.
There are confident yeses and confident nos. Yeah, for purposes of determining whether it's a public meeting, email is beside the point, all right? And this is, it has been litigated. And if any of you follow the Lane County Board of Commissioners brouhaha that happened several years ago, they got in big trouble because it was determined that they were having illegal meetings by email. And they lost that one, and they lost it in a very embarrassing way. So the point here, and it's easy enough to say, well, it's not happening in real time. Like, you know, if one board member reads it today and somebody might not read the rest of it until next week, well, that's not a meeting, is it? Well, it is, because you're all there in the virtual room and you're talking about something. It doesn't matter, bless you, that you're all doing it in you know, at different times. And in the Lane County decision that came down from the judge even suggested that anybody who just sits passively and reads the emails is guilty of participating in the meeting. So the fact that you're not saying anything doesn't necessarily protect you. The appropriate thing to do is recuse yourself or let everybody know that we can't do this, all right? So it doesn't matter that it's an email. And then this one, we have 5 members attending the work session. Is that a quorum?
Yes.
Yep. They're hammering out personnel policies. Is that a matter of district business?
Yes.
but it's not a meeting, it's a work session.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. That's the right answer. And I often, people will ask that in all seriousness. Oh, no, we have our meetings and we know public meetings law. We have our meetings and we know how to follow public meetings. But in between meetings, sometimes we get together for a work session. It's informal. We don't decide anything, or, we do strategic planning, or we do goal setting, or, something. But the fact of the matter is you are discussing or deliberating toward a matter of district business. And if a quorum of you is present, it is a public meeting, no matter what you're calling it. Okay. The work session one I hear a lot. No, we're just a work session. We just get things done between meetings. Still a public meeting. Okay. Whoops. That was the right answer. Okay. So what is the difference between a legal public meeting and an illegal public meeting?
Notice, not being noticed.
Notice. Brilliant.
Okay,
That's the primary thing that differentiates a legal meeting from an illegal meeting. Yes.
okay, now there are certain situations where it's appropriate, where it's like an emergency situation where you're not capable of giving notice because you have to make a decision about something. How do they find that?
I'm glad you asked that question because we can talk about the notice in an emergency. So let's talk about that now, shall we?
Okay.
The difference between a legal public meeting and an illegal public meeting is notice primarily. I mean, yeah, you can save an illegal meeting by giving notice and you can get yourself in trouble by not sending the notice, okay? How much notice is required, to your point? There is no specific time frame built into the statute, not yet. There might be eventually, but there isn't one. The standard is you have to provide general notice to the public at large and actual notice to specifically interested persons. All right, specifically interested persons primarily includes two groups of people. One is the media. All right, they are considered especially interested, so you have to make sure that they get notice of your meetings. Well, we can talk a little bit later about media and what we mean by that. So they're specifically interested. And then if anybody in your community or elsewhere says, please notify me every time you have a meeting, and you are required to do that. Okay, so you keep a list of those people. And some communities have one or two who are just really interested in what you're up to. And that's kind of cool, I guess. But you have to notify them. For the most part, the standard is general notice to the public at large. So that is, however, makes the standard of compliance under the law, by the way, if you ever went to court, is substantial compliance. All right. Are you substantially complying with the intention of the law? And so you guys figure out what will give general notice to the public at large. And it's usually a reasonable amount of time. For a regular meeting, maybe, I don't know, 5 to 7 days is usually pretty reasonable. General notice to the public at large, and in terms of the way you go about giving the notice will also contribute to that. For example, in the old days, I say old days because I'm now one of the old people who does this, before technology became what it is, the standard, the gold standard was you advertise in the newspaper. And that was when we had newspapers, local newspapers, lots of them. And the expectation was if you're going to have a meeting, you got to notify, you got to put an ad in the paper, right? And people did that. You've been around for a while, you probably have experienced that. Anymore, that is not necessarily required. As George gave an example, there are some places where the statutes require it to be published in the newspaper. In some public contracting contexts, it must go in the newspaper. For general notice to the public at large, the newspaper is not required. It can be, if you want to, you can publish it there. If that's where people are likely to get their information, that works. Websites have kind of replaced newspapers now as kind of the fallback notification place. So if you have a website, that counts. And then whatever else makes sense in your community. George gave some examples, but if people get their information from the bulletin board in the post office, or your office door, or wherever else it might be appropriate for people to go. I like to see at least 2 personally, because I think that conveys the website is the obvious one, I think, and the easiest that people will go there. But you always want to make sure you're covering like people who don't have technology or can't use it or don't have access to it. And that would be some sort of old fashioned way, like post it somewhere. Okay. But you can decide what general notice to the public at large looks like for you guys. All right. Now, in terms of the amount of time that you have to give the notice, for your regular meetings, this is the standard. Okay. Just a certain reasonable amount of time ahead of time. If all you intend to do is have an executive session, you're going to convene, go into executive session, be done and move on. Like, it might be an emergency executive session. The amount of time that you have to advertise it is the same as for any other meeting. It doesn't change. It's an executive session. Okay. Executive sessions require notice as well, but the time frame is the same as any other meeting. special meetings, which is most of the time anything out of your regular meeting schedule. Most districts meet once a month, right? You might meet in between or whatever. The special meeting is you're going to call a meeting outside of the regular order of business for some reason. Not an emergency, but you just can't wait till the next meeting. So that is at least 24 hours notice ahead of time is what the statutes require. And then an emergency meeting, which is what you were referencing there, you got to go into a session and you got to meet now. You know, something has happened. You know, I believe that there's been a sinkhole that's opened in front of the district's office and we have to address that now. Or our manager just got convicted for embezzling and we have to meet to talk about that. That's an emergency, has to be a bona fide emergency. And the standard is you give as much notice as possible under the circumstances. And it might just be at minimum, notify your local newspaper reporter. Okay, most of you, for terms of media, you're covered by a local reporter, right? Most of you are not getting the TV station that's not coming to your meetings unless you're in really big trouble, and then they will. So notify the media. So at minimum, make sure the media is aware, all right? Because in many cases, they are a stand-in for the public. We'll talk about some other contexts for that, but send as much notice as possible under the circumstances. And if that just means putting it up on your website, you know, that could be enough, all right? So it's kind of that general standard for publishing notice. All right. True or false? If no members of the public attend your board meetings for 1 year, the public body is not required to send out notice. False. I can tell you right away that the true and false ones are major softballs. Okay, they're given there to make you laugh. All right, and the reason why it makes you laugh is because, oh, for goodness sake, that's ridiculous. But it is not outside the realm of the stuff that I hear about sometimes, because clients will call and they'll say, you know, they'll tell me about some meeting and I'll say, well, did you send out notice? And they'll say, well, no, we've quit doing that. Nobody ever comes through. What's the point? Nobody ever comes. Doesn't matter. Okay, the point is the notice is required. It's not that hard. So get in the habit of doing it because the law requires you to do it. And it'd be better to do it and not get in trouble and never use it, or not do it and then find out that somebody is dragging you to court over it. Okay, what happens if you don't get proper notice? Well, yep, question?
It's actually 2 in 1.
Okay.
Can a board add items to the agenda during a board meeting without proper public notification? Second part is, if so, can the board also have a discussion and vote on that item during that meeting?
Okay, if you didn't hear the question, and this actually gets us to a little nuance of notice that we want to make sure to cover anyway. In order for the meeting notice to be complete, it's supposed to be not only the time and place of the meetings, which is what one would expect. It's supposed to include a proposed agenda, which suggests that you should know within a few days of your meeting what you plan to talk about, or at least have some general idea, right? So a proposed agenda. And that will change from meeting to meeting, one would think. So to answer the question that was asked, you set out your proposed agenda because you're good people and you understand how you're supposed to do this, but then something comes up, right? Before the meeting notice has gone out, something comes up, the board, you know, has the agenda before them. The question is, can they add things to the agenda that were not in the notice? Yes, they can do that. Can they take things off that were in the notice? Yes, they can. You're not married to the agenda, though. The objective is a proposed agenda. And remember, our overall goal is to make the public, you know, be as transparent as we can with the public. But it is a business meeting of the board. And if you need to tweak the agenda, it's okay to do that. No problem. Okay. Don't get into the habit of not sending out accurate agendas, you know, but once you send it out, then you're not married to it. All right. I was going to say something else on that, but it'll come to me. Okay. All right. So what happens if you don't get proper notice? Well, any member of the media or anyone affected by a decision that you made at the meeting can bring a lawsuit claiming you had an illegal public meeting because you didn't send out notice like you were supposed to. If they are successful and the judge agrees, yes, that was an illegal public meeting, then one of two things, the judge will decide one of two things. Your decision, whatever decisions you made there were either voidable or void. Voidable means that they are void until you go back and fix it. The judge will reserve that for times when, okay, you didn't obviously do this on purpose, or we think you didn't do it on purpose, but you may be sloppy, or maybe you didn't bother to find out what the law was, but you can fix it. Okay, so what happens at that point is The board would send out notice like it should have in the first place. The board will meet as it should have in the first place and then vote again on whatever that thing was. And it ratifies the decision and cleans up the record so that as of the date you should have done it, it's all fixed, all right? If a client of mine was accused of improperly sending out notice before they even get to a judge, I would advise them just clean up the record. Go back and fix it. You muffed up. Okay, no problem. You can fix that. Do it right. Here's how you do it. And then it cleans up the record going forward and you don't have to ever go to court. Okay, that works. That moots the legal argument. Okay. Okay, so, or the alternative, and this is usually reserved for if the judge finds that you deliberately violated the law, and the Lane County commissioners were found to be in intentional violation of the meeting's law, then any decision that you made during that meeting is void. Void meaning canceled, like it's off, all right? You're gonna have to start over at square one. And that might not matter. I mean, if you didn't decide anything, okay, or you decided something very minor, you know, like whether or not you'd go to the annual conference this year, or you can fix that pretty easily. But I mean, again, I haven't seen this happen, but I've tried to think of what could be the worst case scenario for this if you didn't properly notice your meeting. And let's say that the meeting at which you didn't send proper notice, for which you didn't send proper notice, is the one where you approved your annual budget. All right, and your meeting notice didn't go out properly, which means somebody brings an action against your board saying you did not properly notice this meeting. It's not a legal meeting. And it goes before a judge and the judge agrees and the judge says, whatever decision you made at your meeting is now void. All right. That means your budget is no longer valid. The money you have spent from it was spent contrary to law. All right. And that is a personal violation to the board. As George has talked about, that board members are responsible for expenditures that are outside, unauthorized expenditures of public funds. That's where that would fall. So the potential is there for it to be at minimum a big mess. All right. Or let's say that the decision you made was to approve a construction contract. All right. And the contractor comes in, they start working, and then all of a sudden they find out that that contract is now void, which cancels it, which puts you in breach. And it can be fixed, yes, but it's very easy to do a public notice. So, you know, don't take that chance. All right. Be aware of the law. The fact that you're here is excellent. And if you have someone in your organization who is good at doing this and does it regularly, give them an extra little candy bar or something, because it's important work. It's not that hard. Okay, and if the plaintiff is successful, then you have to pay their attorney's fees. You, the district, your insurer will not pay that. And then board members can be held personally liable if the violation was a violation of the executive session laws. Like if you didn't properly notice your executive sessions, then that's personal to the board members, and it's up to $1,000 per violation. It's an ethics violation, okay? Again, it should never get to this point. Meeting notice is not a hard thing to do, so just a reminder that just get in the habit of doing it. All right. True or false? Meeting minutes are only required when the board votes on something or holds an executive session. False. You're like, wait, this is a true or false. She told us they would be lame. You're right. Meeting minutes are required for every public meeting, including executive sessions, which are a form of public meeting. Okay. So meeting minutes are required. We'll start with that premise. Can we tape the record the meeting instead? Yes, you can. You can take notes and do minutes the old fashioned way. Perfectly okay. You can tape record it, digital recording, videotape recording. That's all fine. If you, let's say you record the meeting and then somebody goes through and listens to the recording and summarizes it. Okay, that's okay too. You end up with a summary, a synopsis of what happened. Those can be your meeting minutes. Well, when we get to public records, the one thing I'll warn you about is if you record your minutes, record them and then create either a transcript or a summary in written form. Those are both then public records, and you'll have to retain them for certain periods of time, which we're going to talk about when we get to public records. But just don't think that because we've transcribed it or summarized it, that we can just toss the recording or tape over it, because that's a violation of public records laws. Okay, you can tape record it. Can't we just post a running notice somewhere, given the time and date of our meetings? You certainly can. And it's not a bad idea. You'll see this sometimes on websites, or you'll see it on if you send out bills, water bills or sanitary bills, and at the bottom it'll say, the board of directors meets on the third Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock, y'all come. It'll say that. That's nice. I think that's a good idea. However, it doesn't satisfy the public notice requirements because why? No agenda. Exactly. So you're fine to do that, but you'd also need to complete everything you're supposed to do for that meeting. You're supposed to include a proposed agenda. So posting your agenda on your website is a great habit to get into because then anybody who wants to see it can go there and find it, okay? But you're supposed to include a proposed agenda. All right. What should be in the minutes? You're gonna take minutes. The names of every board member present. Okay, we want to know who was there. And just so you know, your meeting minutes are the official record of whatever the board did. Those are permanent records. Okay, they will be retained forever. And 100 years from now, somebody should be able to pick up your minutes and know what happened there. Okay, that's the point of the records, are the minutes. Names of every board member present, so we want to know who was there. It's nice to also say who wasn't there. That's a good idea. So we have a sense of who was actually participating. A general summary of each topic discussed, and it can be a general summary. There is an art to taking good minutes, and it'll just summarize the conversation. It doesn't have to read like a screenplay, although those are entertaining to read because it'll say Mary was outraged that Bob had made this decision, and she cried out, "Bob, no!" And so they're very interesting, but you don't need that level of passion and detail, and they tend to go on and on and on forever. So you need a general summary of the topic discussed, how it was resolved. Was it brought up for information only? Was it tabled for the next meeting? Was there a vote? If there was a vote, you need to reflect in your minutes who voted and how. Okay, this is where board members, elected officials are accountable for your voting record. Okay, you can't vote anonymously. If it's unanimous, and we know who was there, then you can say it was unanimous. If it was a split vote, it should reflect who voted yes, who voted no, were there any abstentions? That should be recorded in your minutes so everybody's clear on who voted, all right, and how they voted. And if in your meeting, you're discussing a particular document, reference it with enough specificity so somebody who wants to go find that document can do it. That you might in your conversation know what, good old resolution 0520, we talked about it. We don't, if I pick up your minutes or somebody does who wasn't there, they're not gonna know what you mean. Okay, so you need enough specificity so we know what is that you're talking about. I want to say, because I do this at different points, but I don't want to forget. The reason I picked this up in the first place, this is the Attorney General's Public Records and Meetings Manual. Some of you may recognize this. This is an old one, by the way. This is outdated. It's 2011. But that was about the time that they put all this stuff online for free and it's searchable. It is, if you go to the Attorney General's, Oregon Attorney General's website, you can find this in their publications. That's what I use now. But I bring this with me for visual aid purposes because the final slides, as I mentioned, are a bunch of resources that are available to help you. This, in my opinion, is the most valuable one you will find, that and maybe the budgeting information, because it's written in very helpful terms, very clear. Both meetings and records are addressed in here. So if you can order this still, I think it's $65 if you want the hard copy version. But it's also available online. So I want you to be aware that that's there. There is a lot of help out there for you in this area. The book is also cool because it includes, it's not mine. It includes some helpful appendices, including examples of good minutes, how to take good minutes, how to certify a copy. We talked about that when George was talking about ordinances. There is a method to that isn't hard, but this tells you how to do that. So anyway, I want to make a pitch for that book. Okay. Meetings generally, before we move on to executive sessions. Yes.
A couple, one goes back to posting. She wanted to clarify that they don't need to post meeting notices in the paper. They can just post them on their website, correct?
For your regular meeting notices, yes. You still can put it in the newspaper. There has never actually been a requirement that you pay for it. That used to be a question, but when people would sort of be in the habit of putting in the newspaper, they say, but our newspaper has started charging us a bunch of money. Do we have to pay for it? And the answer is no. You're required to send it to the newspaper. And again, that's just for your regular meetings. And the caveat again is if the law requires you to publish in the newspaper, you have to publish it or make sure it gets published. And that may include paying for it. But for your regular meeting notices, no. You just have to send it. All right. But having said that, if the newspaper is not in the habit of publishing it, or if you're not sure whether they will or not, again, have an alternative. And the website is kind of the fallback now if you have a website. So it's perfectly okay, that counts as publishing your notice, okay? And then posting it someplace else is also a good idea. Is that the question?
And then there's one more. It says, if a board member reads from a letter they wrote under the new business section, is that document considered public record and should be available upon request?
Okay, if you didn't hear the question, it was a board member has during the meeting is reading from a letter that that board member wrote and they want to read it to everyone, okay? The question is that, that's a public records question technically. Is it a public record? Yes, it is. We're talking about public records. So you have made it a public record by virtue of reading it during the meeting. Okay?
Actually, one more.
Oh,
It
good.
asks, can a non-board member take minutes?
Can a non-board member, for example, an employee, take minutes? Absolutely. Nothing wrong. In fact, it's probably the norm. Either the manager or the administrative secretary or whoever is doing it. Yep.
I was just curious.
You came
in your
back.
Experience, has anyone ever challenged how somebody's posted a meeting or something?
Yeah.
Legal challenge to that?
Yeah, and it's not usually in that, not how you do it, it's that you didn't do it. That's the challenge. Yeah, and as we talked about, if you're not properly sending out notice for your meetings, and when it properly, remember, it's substantial compliance. You want to be able to show, well, here's what we did, here's what we always do. Is that reasonable? And I've argued before a judge once about, well, what else did you want us to do? I mean, it's basically, this is reasonable for our community. So yeah, it happens. Yeah. And most of the time, it's just kind of yeah, as some of you can relate to, unfortunately, there's a certain segment of the populace who believes that government is all a bunch of crime. You're all crooks and you're all trying to sneak things around. Oh, can't be trusted. That whole sort of thing. That's going to happen. But the best way to sort of manage that proactively is be conscientious and be as transparent as you can. Because if they say you didn't, how dare you? You can be like, well, actually, we did it right. And this is what the law requires. And, so don't be sneaky. And then if they say you're sneaky, you'll be like, well, sorry, that's, we followed the law. Okay, any more questions about that before we move to executive sessions? Okay. Executive sessions are public meetings. They have to be treated like public meetings, but there's care and handling is required. So when we talk about executive sessions, here's the definition. Any meeting or part of a meeting of a governing body, that's the board, which is closed to certain persons for deliberation on certain matters. There's a statute there. I have heard executive sessions referred to as an executive session privilege, and it's called that because Oregon favors transparency. Oregon favors public access. Oregon favors having people listen in on the deliberations of public bodies. That's the preference. Executive sessions are considered a privilege because the law gives you, under very specific circumstances, the opportunity to meet outside of public earshot. But you have to be, it's very specific on when you can do that. And there aren't a lot of reasons to do it. There are just a few, and I'm going to walk through all of them. If the reason isn't spelled out in statute, there is no reason. You can't have a legal executive session unless there is specific statutory authority to do that. Okay, so in an executive session, we talked about this earlier in the original context, original slides. You can't vote in executive session. You can talk, you can sort of reach informal consensus. You can all kind of, chit chat your way to relative agreement. But if you want to take an actual vote and decide something, you have to do it in open session. So you have to come out of executive session, reconvene the public session, and take whatever vote you're going to take, okay, in order for it to work. Who can attend an executive session? So the board, almost always. Question about that?
I've seen this done. Okay, so my question is, be in an executive session, you come out of executive session, you reconvene and you hold a vote on what we discussed in executive session. Valid or not?
Generally, yes. And I think what you're alluding to is, do we have to come out of executive session and then just blather away everything that just got decided in executive session or what we talked about? And there is a certain dance that has to happen. And it is okay if you reconvene the public meeting and you say, we're not going to take a vote on the issue that was discussed at executive session, yay or nay. You do not have to necessarily disclose anything. And there are obvious reasons for that. You were in executive session because it's all something confidential, right? So it doesn't make sense to come out and just give away the confidence. But if all you were able to do is just take that vote, then just make it clear that you're voting on the thing we talked about in executive session. That's okay to do it that way. Okay, yep,
2 minutes need to be made.
hold that thought. We're getting there. You're just you're so smart. You're way ahead of me. Okay, I want to talk about who may attend an executive session. Okay, the board. The board attends the executive. It is a meeting of the board, all right? And in very rare circumstances, board members can be excused, like if they have a conflict of interest, they shouldn't be there talking about whatever they have a conflict about. There are times when it would be appropriate to exclude them, but for the most part, no. For the most part, the board chair decides who's going to be there, and it must include the board, okay, if the board members are present. Anyone authorized by the board gets to decide who else gets to come into the executive session. And that could be, the board chair would say, the board will not go into executive session. We're going to talk about the authority that you have to cite for that. The board will remain, and we also invite our manager and our attorney and whoever else to come, and everyone else is now excused. So the board chair determines who's allowed to come. And the person who takes notes might be that person, or the manager, or whomever. But it's up to the board to decide who gets to participate in the executive session. And you want it to be need to know basis only. You don't want to bring in people who are just mildly interested in the secret things that you're going to be talking about. And then members of the media must be included in almost every case. There are very narrow reasons why you wouldn't. The primary one meaning that you are engaged in a lawsuit with them and they can't listen to your strategy. But for the most part, at least one representative of the media must be allowed to attend your executive sessions. And this is one of those but their journalistic ethics prohibit them from reporting on what is discussed in executive session, provided the executive session is legally called in the first place. If you get into executive session and it was not properly called, then whatever content is discussed that is not covered by that legal umbrella is fair game. All right. So we're going to talk about how to properly call an executive session. But in this context, it's kind of interesting. I think it's interesting because I believe in the fundamental aspects of democracy. In this context, they're not there as reporters ordinarily. I mean, if you're properly calling an executive session, the media are there as in a healthy functioning democracy. The press's role is to be the eyes and ears of the public, to be the watchdog of government. Okay, they're there in a representative capacity. It's a witness. It's somebody who's there just to make sure you all are doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's why they're there. So and I have very rarely in my however many years I've been doing this have I found a legit reporter who doesn't understand that. Okay, they know what their role is there. And it's very rare that they violate those requirements. So and again, they have their journalistic ethics, and this is part of that. But remember, we're going to talk about how to properly call an executive session. If you haven't properly called it, then it's fair game for them to report on it. All right. So that's why, among other reasons, you got to know how to properly call it. Can a board call an executive session whenever it chooses?
That's about the rule. How you laid it out in your rules, right?
It's one of those listed reasons.
Yeah, there's specific
It's
reasons.
a hard word to say, isn't it? Especially when I've been talking all day. I'm like specific. Yeah, but exactly. Okay, and this is worded a little bit ambiguously on purpose, just because it makes you have to think about that. Among other things, first of all, there is no authority for the board to just go into executive session because we think it's a good idea, or this is going to get ugly and awkward, so we want to do it outside of public. You can't do that. All right. So just because you want to is not enough reason to go into executive session and have it be legal. All right. The board can call an executive session. When you're calling an executive, let me give you this by way of illustration, if you can read this. This is the statute that I'm referencing. There are two paragraphs that say exactly the same thing in two different ways. It says all meetings of the governing body of a public body shall be open to the public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting except as otherwise provided for. And then you see this range of statutes here. This range of statutes list all the reasons you can go into executive session. Okay. If it isn't in that range of statutes, you can't do it. All right. So this one says, a quorum of a governing body may not meet in private for the purpose of deciding on or deliberating toward a decision on any matter, except as otherwise provided for by, and here's this range of statutes. So this says you must meet publicly, and this says you can't meet privately unless you are, have an exemption that's listed here in this range of statutes. Okay, so those are the ones we're talking about. So can the board go into executive session whenever it chooses? Yes, if there is a statutorily authorized reason to do it. All right, and I'm going to walk through those with you. Notice is required. An executive session is a public meeting. Okay, it's one that is held outside of public earshot, but for all other purposes, it is a public meeting. Notice is required. You have to send the notice out. If you're going to properly send out notice for an executive session, in the notice that you send out, it will say, along with the rest of the agenda items, the board intends to go into executive session to discuss public records exempt from disclosure, ORS 192.6602F. Okay, you're going to put that in your meeting notice. Whatever the statutory authority is for your executive session goes in your meeting notice. It also will be recorded in your minutes. All right. So when the board chair convenes the executive session, they're going to have, I like to see them have a little script, but they're going to say the board will now go into executive session to discuss public records exempt from disclosure, ORS 192.6602F, and that gets recorded in the minutes. So if it should be in your advertised agenda, it should be in your minutes. Okay. That's what's required to make a very clean and effective notice for executive sessions. Okay. Okay. Minutes are required. Question came up. Yes, you have to take minutes at your executive session. Can you record them? Yes, you can. But they're required. All right. I had somebody we've been doing many of these throughout the last month. And somebody a couple of these ago said to me, well, we don't even bother with executive session minutes because we don't want anybody to know what we talked about. Okay, well, that can work in your favor if you want to, not disclose what you talked about. It also can work against you. If somebody comes back and says you did something illegal in your executive session, you either have proof that you did or you have proof that you didn't, but the minutes provide proof and they can defend, they can help you. But beside the point, they are required. All right. Now, best business practice, probably you are all doing this anyway. Record them separately from your regular meeting, have a separate tape or however you're taping them. And store them separately because executive session minutes are exempt from disclosure if somebody asks for them. And what you don't want is to inadvertently give them out with the rest of the meeting minutes, which are not exempt. Okay, so the idea being that they are confidential, assume they're confidential. There are ways to defeat the confidentiality, but assume that they need to be stored and handled like a confidential document. Okay. Everything discussed in the executive session is confidential to everybody who's in the room. So that's why you want to need to know. You don't invite a bunch of other people because the more people you have, the bigger the chance that they're going to go blather something to somebody that they shouldn't be blathering. Actually when I was at the larger law firm, we represented a city. And the city had a city council and the city was involved in litigation of some kind. I don't remember now who was suing whom. But anyway, the city, which we'll talk about, one of the authorities that are available to go into executive sessions is talk about litigation that you are engaged in or are soon to be engaged in. And you meet with your lawyer and you can just discuss strategy and, the state of the case and all that kind of stuff, which the city council did in executive session. And they came out of executive session and one of the council members who apparently was enjoying how important she felt, bolted across town and went to the other side's lawyer and told them everything that had happened in executive session. Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. You guys are fascinating in many ways. And this was an example of one of those stories we could tell. But anyway, the other side's lawyer had some problems, but with that said, she's, you can't claim confidentiality when somebody's just gone and blathered it. Okay, you can't, once the horse is left, they can't close the barn door or whatever that thing is. Yeah, you know what I mean. Once you blow the confidentiality, you blow it for everybody. Question?
So executive minutes can be recorded?
Mm-hmm.
Can you take them for note-taking purposes and not for the recording? If
Mm-hmm.
you're doing,
Either one.
you can do the recording.
It's like any other meeting minutes. If, let's say you record them and it's usually some, helpful staff person types them up, summarizes them for you. You keep them both for as long as the public records retention requires you to keep them. The executive session minutes are in writing are one public record and the recording's another one. But yeah, they're both confidential for as long.
Do like the recording on my phone, like with an app? Like, have to keep that.
Yes, yes. And we won't get too far into this, but I don't recommend using your home anything for public business. I just had a client, I use my cell phone for both, my office phone forwards to my cell phone, but it's also my cell phone that I talk to my daughter on and stuff. And I had somebody, I was driving home yesterday and someone called me and she said, well, can I, potential client, I said, well, can you email me? I'm on the road. If you could email me, then I'll send you, what you need. And she said, well, can I just text it to you? And I was like, no, I'd really rather you didn't. Texting, I don't want it on my personal phone for one. I mean, I'm not a public official, but arguably it could be accessed. But it's also hard to, if you're storing things on your personal computer, they can be discovered in a lawsuit. Do you really want to give up your personal computer to, remember the city of Beaverton? Do you follow any of that Beaverton Nike kerfuffle that was several years ago? So anyway, that's another soapbox I won't get entirely on, but I don't recommend doing it on your phone. You can get, digital recorder, take, the old cassette recorder, that's fine. I see districts do it in all kinds of ways, but it's okay to do it. Like you said, that counts, but you have to retain that and it becomes a public record. And I wouldn't recommend putting it on your personal phone if you can avoid it. Yes.
Are the executive minutes considered private forever? Is there a statute of limitations?
We're going to talk about, when we get to retention of public records, we'll talk about that specifically. It's public records question fundamentally. There is not a statute of limitations per se with respect to discovering them. They are discoverable in a lawsuit. Okay, just because they're not disclosable public records and they're confidential. If you get sued for some decision the board made and somebody, the other side demands to see your executive session recordings, a judge can rule that you have to disclose them. Okay, so you're not hidden forever because you are there in executive session, but they are confidential. Okay, for as long as they are confidential. All right. Okay, I'm gonna push on. We're going too far. Go ahead, stuck in that for too long. The permissible reasons to call an executive session. I don't include the statutes for all of these, but there is a statute for each of these that I'm going to tell you about. All right, one, so a few of these have to do with employment related things. Employment is almost always treated carefully, like confidentially. In this example, the board can, and again, we start with the premise, the board is responsible for the CEO, right? They usually hire, fire, discipline, that the CEO, whoever that is, answers to the board. And in this case, the board can consider the employment of really any employee, but most of the time it's going to be the CEO. And they can talk about that in executive session and strategize about that in executive session and even do interviews in executive session as long as they've done a few things ahead of time. And the things they have to do is we're going to put all the transparency ahead of the executive session. So they have to advertise the position, has to be advertised. It's not like an internal hire. Hiring procedures in place, like we know what process we're going to follow to hire these people. You should have a job description in place. And then for both of those things, the hiring procedures and a job description, the public has to have been given an opportunity to review them and comment. So here's a public hearing that must be held. Here's our job description. Here's how we intend to hire our new fire chief. We're going to have a hearing, public testimony. You don't have to do what they say, but you have to hear about it. And then from there, once you've done that, then you can do everything else in executive session up to the point of actually hiring somebody. Okay, that has to be voted on, but everything else can be done privately if necessary. All right, now that is not available if you're filling a vacancy in an elective office. Okay, if filling board vacancies, filling your budget committee, those kinds of things are public session stuff. There is no executive session authority to do them. And I occasionally run into that, and it's usually in the context of, we have a board vacancy and we've got 3 people applying, and some of us really don't like Sue, and we'd really rather be able to talk about Sue badly without her knowing about it. I get it. It's small communities, you all know each other and everybody wants to be nice, or theoretically wants to be nice. and it is awkward as heck. I get that, but you can't have those conversations in private. You have to fill those positions in an open way. Okay, this is why you can't have secret ballots. You know, you have to have those conversations openly. So if you're filling a vacancy in an elective office or creating a committee, any public committee like your budget committee, there is a tendency for people, in my experience, clients, to potentially conflate that there's this idea that, well, if it has to do with employment, we can do it in executive session. That's a little bit of an overstatement. All right. When you're talking about a specific employee, usually yes. When you're talking about employment generally, no. So if you're adopting employment policies, including compensation policies and benefit plans and, you know, stuff like that, those are open session stuff. Okay, not executive session. And then if you haven't done all of these preliminary steps and you want to interview or talk to or debate who you're going to hire as your CEO, that must be done in open session. Okay, those conditions, if those conditions haven't been met, it's open session stuff. All right, so that's one. These are two different ones that are similar. One is, again, these are both related to employment. This first one is about you're considering disciplining, firing your CEO, for example, or hearing complaints, like either an employee or a member of the public or somebody has beef about this person, okay? You can do that in executive session and must really in executive session. However, whoever it is you're talking about has the option of asking that it be done in open session instead. So that means you have to tell them, we're going to go into executive session to discuss your performance, you know, we're to hear complaints about you, whatever. You have the right, employee, to have it be done in open session. Do you want to do that? And they have that right. And if they say yes, then it's open session stuff. And I've actually seen it go both ways. When there's not a lot of trust between the staff and the board, there are, I have seen an employee actually successfully once say, this board is gunning for me and the public loves me and I'm doing a good job. So I'm not going to let them talk about me privately. Let's talk, let's go. Let's bring it out of the public. And the manager had a bunch of the public come and speak up because they're like, don't you dare fire him. We love him. So anyway, it worked in that situation. The alternative is it's incredibly awkward and embarrassing and the person gets fired in public, but there's that risk that they take, okay? So the individual has the right to have it be done in open session. Otherwise, it's done in executive session. There's a related one, and this is just for employee evaluations. You know, you want to give your CEO his or her annual performance review. That can be done in executive session. You might love them. You know, it's not a disciplinary thing. It's just you want to evaluate, you want to be able to talk candidly. You can do that in executive session, but that's another one where if the employee prefers that it be done in open session, then you have to do it in open session, okay? All right. A few others that don't come up often, but if you have a collective bargaining agreement, a lot of fire districts do, a couple of other districts do, and you want to meet with whoever is negotiating management side on your behalf, you want to meet with your negotiator, the one who's going to, you know, you're going to strategize and they're going to go to the other side with their demands. You can meet with that person in executive session. Similarly, if you are intent to buy or sell real estate, remember that keeps coming up, real estate. Real estate can be discussed in executive session, the appraisal and the you know, the strategy. If you are meeting with the person who's doing your negotiations on your behalf, which could be your lawyer, could be your agent, could be another board member, whoever's doing the negotiations, you can do that in executive session. Executive session, if you want to talk about acquiring or liquidating public investments. I don't know, I've never seen that happen, but all right. Preliminary negotiations involving matters of trade or commerce in which the governing body is in competition with governing bodies in other states or nations. Again, doesn't come up often, but interestingly on this road tour that we've been on, I've talked to two different people who have used this legitimately and they were both PUDs who were given electric PUDs, people's utility districts, and they were providing electricity or some such, and they were in competition with the private sector for contracts, et cetera. And so they were legit able to talk about that in executive session. Most of you are not going to be competing with the private sector in any significant way, but occasionally it comes up. To consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. We'll talk about public records shortly. But there are some public records that can be, you can refuse to disclose them because they contain confidential stuff or stuff that is privileged, all right? if you go into an executive session for the purpose of reviewing a confidential document, there is a specific authority to do that for the obvious logical reason that if it's confidential information, you want to be able to talk about it confidentially, and you can go into executive session, and that's the public records exempt from disclosure exemption, okay? The second one, which is, there is not any sort of general authority to go into executive session to meet with your lawyer. There just isn't one. All right, we want to talk to our lawyer and we want it to be confidential. Why can't we do it in executive session? Because there's no authority to do that. Okay, and my guess is it's because then districts or anybody would say, we'll invite our lawyer to everything and then we never have to talk about anything in open session, would be my guess. But anyway, however, you can meet with your lawyer in executive session if you are in active litigation or litigation is likely to be filed. It's filed or likely to be filed, all right? And the lawyer has to be there. Being on the phone is okay. But the whole point of the conversation is to strategize or update the board on the status of litigation, okay? So there's the litigation one is there. And that, again, the lawyer has to be there. You can't just convene the board to talk about the litigation. And then, outside of litigation, what you can do, and I use this often with clients, let's say you're not in litigation. Let's say you just need advice. The board needs advice from the board, from the lawyer. Help. How do we do this privately? There is a way to do it. And it's completely legit. And that is to use this earlier one, public records exempt from disclosure. If my clients call and they say, the board needs advice on, we want to do this thing, or we did this thing, and we need an analysis, did we do right? Did we do wrong? What are our risks? What recommendations do you have? The same kinds of things I would do one-on-one with them. I put it in a memo, a letter, a memorandum, put it in writing. That is subject to attorney-client privilege, okay? What I write for my clients is confidential because it's attorney-client privileged information, all right? Because it is confidential, it is exempt from public records disclosure. If somebody asked for it, you don't have to give it up because it's confidential, right? Well, that enables you to talk about it in executive session because it's a public record exempt from disclosure. So if you need advice from your lawyer and you're not in litigation yet, and you don't know whether you will be, then have your lawyer put something in writing. And then the lawyer doesn't even have to be there, or they can or they can't. But as long as their document is there, then the board can talk about what's in the document. And that's legit in executive session, okay? Somebody had a question. Was that you, no? Okay, Kaylee?
How does the manager report job performance reviews to the board privately, especially if there are negative things about an employee?
So the question is, the manager wants to report negative information to the board about a particular employee. My thought is you probably could do that under this one. Dismissal or disciplining of or hearing complaints or charges brought against somebody. The board, I mean, this doesn't, ordinarily the board's job is to hear complaints and discipline and whatever, the CEO. But if the issue is that the CEO wants to bring complaints or disciplinary matters to the board, you could get there this way too, in my opinion, which is the one that enables you to talk, hear negative things about employees. I think that would be the appropriate way to do that. Yep.
Let's say I provide board with information that we don't reference in the meeting. Like a board wanted to know what the salaries were of individuals. We don't share them in the meeting, but I provide them on a shared drive just for them. But we don't talk about it in the meeting. Is that okay? You know what I'm saying? Do I have to say that I provided that to the board?
Well, first of all, just parenthetically, anything having to do with compensation is always public. All right, you can't keep that private. Who works there, what their job title is, and how much money they make is always going to be disclosable. Okay, so in that context, if the board just says, "Can you give us a public document that shows how much money everybody makes?" That's going to be a public document, regardless of the way in which you provide it. Okay, there's nothing to protect that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
May have to do with public records. So can I get the confirmation on how long our public meeting minutes were? required to be kept?
That's a public records question. Thank you for asking that. We're gonna get to that. I see you're excited to talk about public records, aren't you? That's good. Okay. Okay, you can meet an executive session to discuss the security of our infrastructure is kind of the general way to think about this. This has been there in some form for a while. After 9/11, they added a lot to this. The intention being that what we don't want is to let the public at large know how to sabotage our infrastructure. Okay, so those conversations can be confidential. So if you're talking about nuclear power, electricity, gas, hazardous substances, petroleum products, sewage, water, telecommunications, or data transmission, and your conversation is about the security of those systems, then you can talk about those in executive session because it would make sense to do that. Okay. All right, and that's it. All right, if you don't see the authority for an executive session in that list, it isn't there. All right, so there might be ways to sort of get you to confidentiality somehow, but just to call an executive session for any other reason is not allowed. All right, penalties for violation. This has come up in a couple different ways. If you're not complying with the executive session laws, that is an ethics violation on the part of the board members. Okay, potential up to $1,000 per violation. The tail on an ethics violation is 4 years. So in theory, if you have an executive session every month and you're doing them all wrong, the potential is there for $1,000 12 times a year times 4 years. So that could be substantial. And that money comes out of the individual's pockets. But then again, it's excused if you're relying on advice of your legal counsel. So we encourage you to get advice, even if the advice is bad, at least the fact that you got it will help you. Okay. All right. I'm going to talk about a couple of new laws in the public meetings realm. Anything left? Any more questions about the stuff we've just talked about? Kaylee, we good?
Got a couple here. One says, I was under the impression exempt wages of a particular employee can be discussed, but that non-exempt employee wages can only be discussed in general terms. Please clarify.
I'm not familiar with that distinction. I don't think it matters. I think public compensation, Oregon favors heavily anything having to do with money. There, you will never, very rarely, in my experience, find a way to talk about that privately. If somebody requests, how much are you paying your employees? It's not going to matter whether they're exempt or non-exempt. Doesn't matter.
And another one, can a board establish a personnel committee less than a normal quorum with the authority to oversee hiring and reviews, personnel matters, etc., outside of public meetings?
So the question is, can the board create a personnel committee whose job it is to handle presumably performance evaluations, whatever? Well, first of all, the personnel committee should only be, if you have a manager, the board should not be involved in the evaluation of anybody but the manager. Okay, that's problematic. With that said, yes, the board can create a personnel committee. It's not all that uncommon in my experience where, you have a liaison, like you're our staff liaison. You need to go and find out stuff or communicate stuff on the board's behalf. That's all perfectly legit. If you create a committee of any kind, it's possible, particularly, certainly if you have a quorum of the board on it, but even if you don't, and their task is to come back and advise the board about something. We recommend that you hire this person, or we advise you to not hire that person. Those are treated like public meetings as well. There might be a separate executive session authority for that. But the short answer is yes, the board can do that. Yes, George.
I just want to make sure that I understood the question correctly. Was that a question whether that group had to meet in public or whether they did not? Or was the question? It was.
Mm-hmm.
So then I want to make sure I understand your answer because I may be telling this wrong. I thought that committee reports directly to the board. They have to meet in public.
That's what I'm saying.
It
It may be a public meeting, all right?
be a public meeting.
But that doesn't necessarily mean they have to do it in public. It may be a public meeting, but there may be authority to do it in executive session, even though it's a committee. Committees can meet in executive session as well, if they're subject to these laws. And if they're talking about confidential employee performance stuff, then I think there's a good argument that, yes, the committee would meet an executive session. And you're going to have to send out the notice, et cetera, but that's how that would be handled confidentially. Okay. All right. Interesting questions. All right. Okay, a couple of new laws. Some of you probably are aware of these. We had a couple of changes in the law, both that came out of the lockdown pandemic stitch that we found ourselves in. The first one was in 2020, and if you remember, the pandemic, the initial lockdown started in the spring of 2020. It was March-ish, and everybody was kind of in prime budget mode at that point. And I know I got some calls, and apparently so did the governor and the legislature. How are we supposed to go and have our hearings and adopt our budget? And, it's all very specific hearings and meetings and law notice and all that stuff before we adopt our budgets. My advice to my clients, which turned out to be kind of ratified in this statute, was it's always been legal to have virtual meetings. That's okay. The issue is always, can the public hear you? Like, you can talk on the phone, you can have meetings by speakerphone, as long as the public can dial in and listen to what's going on, okay? Similarly, if you have a virtual option like Zoom or something like that, that has always been the law, as long as the public can attend, okay? So anyway, the initial law in 2020 just clarified that meetings can be held virtually, virtual meetings, and you're allowed to implement social distancing measures. If you have your meetings in person, social distancing is okay, you can do that. Or a virtual meeting is okay, or some hybrid is okay. So this whole point was to clarify for public bodies, to get us primarily through the budget process, so everybody was clear. And then it became it also applied to any other public meeting that you had. And we're still there. It's still the law. It always was, but now it's really clear. The second one came out in 2021, and this was a little bit of a surprise at the last session that I taught. Every governing body is required now to provide a remote access alternative if it is to the extent reasonably possible. So everybody is required to have some kind of hybrid meeting, okay? And that means you're meeting in person like you always have, but you have to give the public some kind of virtual option. That could just be a simple speakerphone, that if that's feasible for you to do it that way. Meetings have been conducted that way for many years. Or the alternative, a Zoom link or whatever virtual thing you're using. So that's a requirement now. And as has always been true, you can allow testimony to be submitted in writing. So if somebody has something that they want to say and they maybe can't attend the meeting, or even if they can, whatever they have to say can be submitted in writing, and that counts. Okay, that's been the law anyway, but that's now been clarified. Is there a question about that one? No? Okay. All right, those are a couple new laws. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Someone told me, let's say a board goes into executive session, and if somewhere in that meeting, a director feels the meeting is no longer legal, that something has changed, that director can end the meeting, or leave, or is it end?
So they're in executive session.
Yeah.
One of the directors has decided this is not right, and they want to, can that director alone end the meeting? Probably not. You're going to need a majority to agree to end the meeting.
Okay.
The board chair usually has the authority to end the meeting, but that can be overridden. It would be appropriate anytime in any context, if you are a board member and you feel that the board is doing something that you are not okay with, or, whatever reason, executive session, some other reason. My recommendation, first of all, would be say something so it gets in the record. Because if somebody comes back and blames the board for things, you want plausible deniability. It's like, I told them, I didn't, wasn't me. That would be my recommendation. Can you exit the meeting? Sure. I mean, one way to do it would, it wouldn't work in executive session, but in theory, you could leave to try to defeat the quorum, then the board couldn't do anything. I don't recommend that as a strategy. The legislature tries that periodically, yeah, I mean, as a matter of, do they have the authority to end the meeting? No, they really don't, not without the rest of the board. Any other questions on public meetings? Isn't that fun? Some of you are still dozing.
This having remote access or telephone access to our board meetings where it's reasonably possible. So I'm just saying, get a conference speaker and put it, anybody can phone in and listen, but it's just muted.
Yes, and that's not uncommon. If any of you have phone systems, and there's a way to set up like a phone bridge. So, you give people a number in your meeting notice and they can call in. And all they really get to do is listen and they're muted unless you want to hear, and then you can ask. Yeah.
To say something I've done with, is use free conference call. And sometimes we'll just get somebody who's got their cell phone, let's put it on speaker, and then people can call, the number, and then they can listen and talk. And
Yeah, the issue is always going to be, can the public hear the board?
It's really easy to set.
Can the board, if the public is dialing in or zooming in or however they are, can they follow the conversation as it goes? And if they again, you don't have to let anybody talk, so muting them might be wise. But that's really the standard. It doesn't really matter. And then remember, it says whatever, to the extent reasonably possible. The law understands that not every district is rolling in money. You kind of do the best you can with what you've got. Might be a phone bridge, might be a Zoom, whatever works for you. Apparently the public likes this hybrid meeting thing. And my guess is that they wanted to continue indefinitely to allow people to attend virtually.
I didn't mean to drag it out, but there's a public comment on our agenda, so I would think the phone would have to be.
Yeah, if you're going to take public comment, I would recommend people be able to comment. And that's another one where they notice the law said or allow them to submit it in writing. If for whatever reason they can't speak at your meeting, or can't, or you don't have time or whatever, then you can say, please submit your comments in writing. That counts in any public hearing. If you attended any public hearing, people can submit their comments in writing or verbally, either way. Yeah.
It's easy to do. I mean, I've done it before. You just dial in. If you're free conference call, you're the host. You just have your phone and you have the thing on speaker, and then the people speak. Sometimes you can't hear that much. It's a big room, but
Yeah.
Still, it's easy to do. It doesn't cost a thing.
Exactly. And my only issue there is I've been to those meetings where you're always like, what? What?
Yeah.
Huh? And if that's an ongoing problem, I'd recommend upgrading to something bigger. Yeah.
You're hearing it, and you have to tell other people what they just said.
Yeah. It's a challenge, but at minimum, you could do that. Yeah. Okay. It's time for a break. The bathrooms, I understand, are still working.
Everything's working.
I have 2:46. Can we be back here by 3? We have one big topic and a couple little ones, and then we're out of here. Okay?
Y'all come back now.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you involved in hiring?
Well, it's not in this right hiring, but that one slide about you have to take input on the job description and the hiring process. The public isn't involved in who you are. It's about the process. Because that's what the law says. The idea being that if you're going to talk about all this secretly in executive session, why you're doing this, you need to let the public know what the criteria are that you're using and the process you use. It doesn't mean you have to listen to what they say. They need public, you have to give us.
We just went through this very quickly. Yeah. Our fire chief gonna go.
Yeah.
You recommend someone already in the board. No. Could have been at meetings and they weren't, so there was no discussion.
Did they do this in executive session or did they do it out?
Got the. Special executive session is really where, because we wanted an executive session just before to discuss. Well, it turned out that the chief that's leaving, his recommendation was no paper. So we saw those. And then we had a consensus that we would offer a conditional employment. So that was all done in executive. It came out of executive session based upon this. What's a conditional offer?
So were you affected by the fire?
That kind of caught me off guard because I've never seen that before. Is it relatively new, because I've gone through higher fire chiefs and it's never been done.
Soil erosion. plants on-
Maybe we need to talk to the fire chiefs.
Well, I mean, it's been interesting. I mean, that really caught me off guard. And my board chairman was with Redmond.
Yeah.
But we haven't had a chance to talk, except for the fact that I'm
Is it over? No, I'll let it go for a while. Maybe they're,
Yeah, it does.
Okay, you have been awesome to hang in here this long, especially, and those of you in virtual land, thank you. Okay, we're gonna talk about public records. This is at the end, kind of by design. It's not the most important thing you will ever do, but there's some basic stuff with public records you should be aware of. I am going to go through this very quickly, all right? And most of us are kind of, have a strong incentive to get this over with anyway, so you probably don't mind that. But please stop me if you have questions as we go, because I'm gonna go pretty quickly, all right? All right, we're gonna talk about public records. There is a lot of parallels between public records and public meetings. That whole transparency thing that we value in Oregon, you'll see it in the public records arena as well as the public meetings arena. And you'll see a lot of comparable kinds of requirements. So when we're talking about public records, we're gonna talk about, what that says. We'll tell you what the law says, disclosure requirements, exemptions from disclosure, and storage and retention. We've had a couple questions already about records retention. We'll touch on that as well. Okay, so the first question is, what is a public record? It's how Oregon defines it. It's in the statutes, and it's any information in any form capable of retention by a custodian that, and then it lists all the things that it's related to. And you can take from that everything's a public record. Okay, just assume that it is. If you can transmit it, send it, put it in an envelope, put it on the wall, touch it in with your hands, assume it's a public record, okay? And it has to be treated accordingly. And it is a public record, even if it is a confidential record, okay? They're public records and have to be handled in a certain way. Just some have to be disclosed if requested and some don't, if requested, okay? All right, the public's rights in public records. Just as the public's rights in public meetings are to attend and to listen, there is a similar sort of limited right in the public to records. The public's right in records is to inspect. They have to have access to records that are not exempt from disclosure, and you can give them an opportunity to make notes or make copies or whatever, but they have an inspection right. And when members of the public will tell you that they have way more rights than that, and they don't, that's not what the law requires. So they have the right to inspect it. Oh, and but notice it says in the statute, you probably can't read that. Every person has the right to inspect any public record of a public body in the state, except as otherwise expressly provided for. And then we saw this already with public meetings. There's this whole range of statutes. So the public has a right to inspect records except when they don't. And when they don't, will be listed in this range of statutes. And those are the ones we're going to touch on really quickly here. True or false? The records custodian may deny a request for a public records for public records when he or she knows the requester has a bad motive. False. False. I hope you know that's false. Although it's not uncommon in my experience to have districts, some that I work with regularly, and they'll, somebody will be requesting a record. I'll say, did you give it to him? And they'll be like, no, he's just on a fishing expedition, or he's got something against us, or she's, she's just mad. The motive really doesn't matter. Okay, the point is you have to comply with the law. Whoever's requesting it has a right to inspect, except when they don't. All right. So every public entity that is subject to these laws, and that's everybody, is required to have somebody whose job is to be the public records custodian. You don't have to call them that, but essentially, and it should just probably be one person, but one person's job to make sure the records stay safe, one person's job to take requests for review and to decide when and how they can be reviewed, and basically sort of shepherd that process along. The public records custodian keeps the records safe and provides proper and reasonable opportunities for inspection and examination of the records in the office of the custodian, and reasonable facilities for making memoranda or abstracts during usual business hours. Now what this tells you is that you get to control the access to the public records, and you should, all right? You will occasionally get somebody from the public who will tell you, I want a report prepared and I want it in this format and I want it delivered to me on Saturday. And, they'll tell you all the stuff that you are supposed to do because they're the taxpayer. That's not true. All right. You guys, your district should have a policy in place, and we'll talk about what has to go in your policy, but should it include, times when records can be inspected? What requirements people are going to have to follow? Like, they're going to be supervised, and they're not going to, be able to just sit down at your computer and scroll through all your documents, et cetera. So stay in control of that process. If the record is maintained in machine readable or electronic form, furnish proper and reasonable opportunity to assure access. This is the law trying to catch up with electronic records. So basically what it says, if you have emails or PDFs or something that's stored on a computer, you don't just let somebody sit down and go rifle through it. You figure out a way to let them have whatever they want in a way that makes sure the rest of the documents are secured. The custodian can adopt reasonable rules so that the person is not interfering with the regular operations of the district. Okay, this is an area of law where the legislature has been hammering away at changes on the public records law even before the pandemic started and then during those legislative sessions. So there's been a lot of change in this area. It hasn't stopped. There will be more. But here are some new things to be aware of. One of the changes that was imposed is some time constraints in terms of responding to a public record. And now, under the law, you have 5 business days to acknowledge it. Okay, so you can't just ignore a record request. You have to acknowledge, okay, we got it. Thank you. And then you have another 10 days after that to address it somehow. All right, you have to get some kind of response to it. You can, give them what they're asking for within that period of time or otherwise respond. But you have essentially 15 days from the time you receive the request until the time it should be resolved. You can add more time if necessary. I'm going to tell you about that. But to keep that 15-day time period in your mind. The point of this was that there were some people who felt strongly that some governments were stonewalling them or just dragging this out unnecessarily. So the legislature put in some time requirements in there. The response time can be extended while you seek clarification. I always like to get your requests in writing if you can. Email is great. Filling out a form and submitting it is great. But if you don't know what they're asking for, or it's so broad that you kind of aren't sure what they're looking for, you can ask for clarification and you get some time to do that. You also have additional time if you need to confer with your lawyer about, what do we do with this? There's time built in for that, so you can extend it. The request is considered complied with if you explain where the records are available. This is where your website can help you a lot. For the most common, in my experience, the most common records that are requested by the public are your meeting minutes. So if you aren't already doing it, put those on your website. Just get in the habit of putting it up there so that anybody who wants them can go and find them. Because if somebody says, I want the meeting minutes from, last Thursday's meeting, and you say, go ahead and get them off our website, and assuming that they have access to a website, that counts. Okay, you've done what you need to do. And anything else that people are inclined to request, like, copies of intergovernmental agreements or, your personnel policies or, whatever it is that's publicly facing can go on your website, and then you can just refer people there. And that saves you the time and trouble of having to, have them come in or make copies or whatever. I'm going to skip that one. Failure to respond within time, that 15-day time frame or whatever the adjusted time frame is, it's considered no response and allows the requester to seek enforcement. For special districts, the enforcement arm is the local county district attorney, not your district's attorney, but the DA. All right, they're responsible for if somebody requests a record from you and you're not responding or they think you're not responding, they can make a complaint to the district attorney. And the district attorney, who's ordinarily doing things like prosecuting murders and rapes and kidnappings and, extortion and embezzlement and stuff like that. And they love your public records complaints. But they all have at least, bless you, one person in there who handles this stuff. Basically the process is usually you, the district, will receive a letter from the DA. And it'll have their letterhead. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. And it'll say something like, citizen so-and-so has complained that you haven't responded with this records request. What's the story, basically, is what it'll say. And then usually what happens is you panic and you send that to me because I'm your lawyer and I read it and I'm like, okay, well, tell me, Manager Bob, why is this, what's the story here? And what's helpful is, we gave it to him. Or we don't have it, and we've told him that, or, something that I can help you with. What's not helpful is kind of like, oh God, him again. Yeah, he's we're ignoring him. He's such a pain. That's not an option. Okay, because the DA has a certain amount of time where they rule, they issue an order, comply or not. And if you don't comply, then it goes to court and it gets very ugly. So unless you have a really good reason, you need to be responding to these as efficiently as you can, okay? And please get legal advice if you have any doubts. Okay, responding to the records request, you have to acknowledge receipt of the request. Remember, you have 5 days to acknowledge it, and that could be, thank you for your request, we'll be in touch Monday, something, it's as simple as that, just that we got it, thank you. You can ask for more clarification if necessary, and then you have to give one of the following responses. The statute spells them out. One is you don't have it, or you're not the custodian. That's not our thing, sorry, try elsewhere. That's okay. You have some of the records, and then you give an estimate of the time and what it's going to cost to provide them. We'll talk about fees in a minute, or when you expect the estimates to be given. Or you don't know whether you have them or not, and you'll look into it and get back to them. Or there's a state or federal law that prohibits you from even acknowledging that you have the record, which is a peculiar one, but HIPAA is the only one I could think of off the top of my head that you might say, I can't even tell you whether I have that record. And the point of this is, as you can see, the point is to give some kind of substantive response. Like we're looking into it, and you want to keep the communication going so they don't feel like you're ignoring them, okay? And then you do whatever you say you're going to do. You provide the copy in the form it's requested. If they requested you the minutes and you give it to you, written minutes, you give them written minutes. If they want some other form and you keep it in that form, then you provide it to them in that form. They don't get to decide what form you provide it to them in, but you provide it in the form that you keep it. Okay, I'm going to skip that second bullet point in the interest of time. All right, a citizen asks for written minutes of a meeting to be transcribed onto an audio tape. Are you required to do that?
What if the requester is blind?
What if the requester is blind?
You have to.
Then you have to. You feel good about that answer? You would be right. Remember, I just said that you don't have to provide it in any particular format. You can provide it in the format in which you keep it. The only time when you might have to provide it in an alternative format is the ADA does require reasonable accommodation for a disability. So if they're asking for it in an alternative format because they're blind, for example, then yes, you have to accommodate that, but it's a reasonable accommodation. Can you do it within your budget? You can pass the fees on to them. We'll talk about fees in a minute. But yes, that's the only time when an alternative format is required for all intents and purposes.
Would they have to disclose that they're blind? If they just ask that, do I then have to say, are you blind? I'm just asking.
Yes, they do. And that's true of any disability, even employees. They have to let you know that they need accommodation in order, or otherwise it doesn't trigger the requirement. Yeah.
Would a simple phone call suffice?
A simple phone call to say, are you
Look
blind?
at one of my minutes, our minutes are like a page and a half.
Yeah. A phone call works if they want to call and ask. Nothing wrong. Simple ones like that. However, whatever works for you. I like email personally because I like a paper trail. And it's also sort of, it adds a little bit of formality to the process, but a simple phone call is fine if that works.
Yeah, just.
If it's that simple, if you can
it'd be
respond
simpler
quickly.
than recording the minutes from my minutes. For instance, if I had to put it in an auditory form, it's easier. Just talk.
Oh, just call and tell them?
Instead of make a recording.
If they're okay with that, yeah, I guess that works. I see what you're saying. I thought you meant a request, responding to the request.
Just trying.
Just like, let me just read the minutes to you. Yeah, you could do that. That works. If that is okay with them, sure. Okay. Every public entity subject to these laws is required to have a public records policy. This is a policy adopted by the board, formal policy. This is one of those that I like to see it done in resolution form because it's a policy that's going to be in place for a while. And in that policy, the board has to adopt written procedures for making public record requests. That includes, at minimum, you have to have the name or the position that is responsible for responding to public records requests, like who do we send it to? And then you have to include how do we send it, like an email or a physical address or something. So that goes in your policy. If you, citizen, want to request a record, here's how you do it, okay? And then included in the policy also, if you intend to recover fees, and you can do that if they're provided in your policy, recoverable. The point of the fees in public records are to recover your costs, to make sure you're not going in the hole by having to respond to these things. So they have to be reasonably related to your actual costs. This can't be a profit center. You can't adopt a penalty because somebody's particularly annoying. You don't get to do that. But your fees should be in your policy, and you can recover things like actual costs, like copying costs, or an extra thumb drive if you provide it in that form, or those things. You can pass those costs on. Staff time. If you have somebody, it's going to take somebody a couple of hours to assemble all these things and stack them up and, staple them, then you can charge for that time and recover for that time. Attorney time can be charged to the requester if what you're paying the attorney to do is to sort records for things that can be disclosed versus things that cannot be disclosed, or redacting information that shouldn't be disclosed, and your attorney needs to do that. Just the getting advice from your attorney, that's on your dime. But if the attorney is actually employed in doing that redaction process, that time can be passed on to the requester. So you're going to put that in your policy, how you're going to charge fees. These are other recommendations. Require requests to be in writing. Again, nominal ones, somebody just calls and says, can you send me this? Or, you've heard the website, informal stuff, that's fine. But if somebody's making a substantial records request, or you have the feeling this is going in an unhappy direction, I recommend that you get it in writing. And usually the way to do that best is to have a form. Everybody fills out the same form. All right. It's on our website. Please go complete the form and submit it. And it makes them have to sit down and think about what they want, for one, which helps them narrow and clarify the thing that they're requesting. You should include the times and days when inspection is permitted if you want to limit that in some way, some reasonable amount of time. Considerations for waiving or reducing fees. You can adopt your fees, that has to be in there, but if you want to have the option of waiving a fee or giving somebody a lower fee, that should be a matter of policy. That isn't something that you do arbitrarily. Like, I like you, so I'm going to not charge you, and she's annoying, and I'm going to charge her. You don't have that option. Nothing personal. I don't even know you. But you get the point. So the point is everybody should be treated exactly the same. And if you're going to waive fees, have some public policy reason, like, we don't charge other governments, or we don't charge nonprofits, or we don't charge the media, or whatever. Okay. That should be in your policy if you intend to do that. You post the policy. And by posting, I mean, make it publicly available. Putting it on your website is a great idea, because people can go find it there, and they can see this is our policy. You're not being treated any differently from anybody else. And apply it uniformly to everyone. Never be arbitrary in the way you apply anything that can get you into legal hot water. And if in doubt, don't respond without your lawyer's advice. Okay. That's not just self-serving. That just prevents it from careening out of control and becoming a bigger problem than it needs to be. Okay. All right, when we talk about fees, we talked about a lot of this already. It has to be authorized in your policy. If it's going to be greater than $25, what you do ordinarily procedurally, especially for a big request, is calculate how much staff time and materials and stuff are going to go into this and give the person an estimate. That accomplishes a couple things. One is it makes them think about whether they really need all those records. If they're making a massive public records request, and you say, okay, well, we've calculated that's going to cost you $400. And then first they'll jump up and down and tell you can't do that. You'll be like, well, actually, yes, you can. And then they'll say, well, maybe I don't need that many records. And then they have to refine it down to what they really want. So that it has that helpful management aspect to it. But also it prevents you from doing a lot of legwork and getting a bunch of records together, and then they suddenly don't want them anymore. All right. So you can have them paid in advance. And then you kind of bill against that and refund the difference or charge extra if need be. But anyway, the point being, you have them do it in advance. But if it's going to be $25 or more, then you're required to have them approve it ahead of time before you do any work. You say it's going to be this much money. Are you okay with doing this? And if so, please give us X amount of money. All right. The third one is about waivers, which you've already talked about. Okay. That's just public records law generally. Okay, I'm going to walk through very quickly some very common exemptions from disclosure, but any questions generally about the law? Yes.
That fee, the correspondence between the requester and the district could delay that 10-day completeness. Like hadn't completed the request in 10 days.
Yeah,
How does that impact
The time to respond can be extended if you're kind of in conversation with the person about, we don't understand what this means, or would this work instead, or, you could talk about them, and that stops the clock a bit, as long as you're not deliberately stalling. So yeah, it buys you a little more time if needed. Okay, I'm going to walk through there are more than 500 exemptions from disclosure in the public records arena throughout the statutes. Many of them are very narrowly tailored to certain agencies and stuff. I put together a list of the ones that I find you guys are most likely to encounter. Okay, this isn't all of them, but it's a good sampling of public records that are exempt from disclosure. And you'll find that the public records exemptions, most of them are pretty intuitive. You're like, okay, that makes sense. I get why that would be confidential. And some, interestingly, can be sort of placed in history in that they're trying to respond to some sort of societal issue or problem. Okay, the first one is an example of that. When I first started practicing law, public utility providers, water districts, sanitary districts, different types of anybody who's sort of delivered to an address. All of those customer records were completely public, all right, including the addresses, who lives there, whatever phone numbers you have for them, that's all there in public view and accessible. And what began to happen was, it wasn't new, but the issue that was coming up that the legislature decided to address was that there would be people, usually women, but not always, who were trying to hide from somebody, like I am being stalked, or my ex is coming after me, or I am in danger, or someone in my house is in danger, and they're trying to get away. And then what would happen is whoever was after them would locate them through the public record because they could, and track them down that way. And so there was some conversation at the legislature where they're like, well, what can we do about this? So now there's a couple that we're going to see that address this in part. So this one, if you can read it, is that if somebody comes to you, some customer of yours comes and says in writing, you have them do it in writing, I have reason to believe that I or someone in my household is in danger. Could you please not disclose any personal information about me? And they submit that, take their word for it. You don't have to investigate, and then you just don't disclose it. So if somebody requests, give me what information you have on, Mary Jane Doe, and you can say, oh, I'm sorry, I have no information to disclose to you. You can do it that way. All right. So that was one. And then there are others which we're going to talk about in a second. Employee photo ID badges, not disclosable. Okay. Presumably make sure they don't get duplicated and become security issues. Whatever emails you have that are not just your district business emails, like whatever you keep on file for vendors or employees or something that is not a business email for you, those can be exempt from disclosure. Information of a personal nature that is kept in a personal, medical, or similar file. So that anything in a personnel file, treat very carefully. Employees always have access to their own personnel files, but very rarely does anybody else. If somebody asks for it, don't do anything without legal advice, because what's in there is very confidential, particularly if it's medical in nature. Anything medical, HIPAA in particular protects medical information. So don't disclose that. Unreasonable invasion of privacy. Personally identifiable information, which has come to mean a bunch of things. We're trying to come down with a consistent definition, but essentially anything that's associated with an individual, their home address, social security number, driver's license number, whatever else you might have on file for them as an individual is usually exempt from disclosure. There are a couple of areas where that has been elaborated on. So in the public utility arena, the only thing now that is disclosable, if somebody requests it, is the addresses that you serve, your customers' physical addresses. But who lives there or anything else about them is not public record. Certain confidential information submitted, there's some conditions there. It has to be labeled confidential, et cetera. Non-financial information relating to PERS, actuarial stuff about individual members, et cetera, not disclosable. Library circulation records, we don't have any library districts here, but we have had some sessions where we did, and their circulation records are not disclosable, so somebody can't say, let us know who's reading what in your library system. Okay, and this one has been here for a little while, but it got expanded, and this one is primarily to deal with identity theft problems. Personally identifiable information, so any of that thing attributable to an individual about customers of a PUD specifically, or the names, dates of birth, driver's license numbers, telephone numbers, email addresses, social security numbers of customers who receive water, sewer, storm drain services from a public body unless they consent. So this was primarily to try to get at avoiding identity theft problems. So why you would ever give somebody else's social security number is beyond me, but don't ever do that. But this tells you that if you are one of these kind of utilities that's providing those services, that personally identifiable information of your customers is not disclosable, okay? Personal safety notwithstanding, it's just not disclosable anymore, ever, okay? Unless the customer consents. Okay, and then there's a bunch that are considered, they're called the conditional exemptions, and they're supposed to be a balancing test, like it's exempt from disclosure unless the public interest, favors disclosure. And don't try to make that call yourself if you can avoid it. There's a lot of debate about what the public interest requires. An example might be, your personnel evaluation, for example, of your CEO is ordinarily confidential. However, if it turns out that your CEO is found out to be a mass murderer and it was an issue somehow in your district, then the press might make an argument that's in the personal in the best interest of the public for us to know what kind of employee was this and how were they behaving in the job. So there's a balancing test and you may have to disclose it. But for the most part, those are the conditional exemptions. For the most part, they're kept confidential unless you have a good reason to disclose them. And included in there are records relating to litigation. Again, those are subject to attorney-client privilege. Don't disclose those, certainly without your lawyer's knowledge or permission. Trade secrets, which you might get like in a public contracting context. Criminal investigatory information, or really investigatory information of any kind. If you have either law enforcement or some regulatory agency is investigating something like an OSHA violation or a workers' comp problem or something, almost always the investigatory information is kept confidential, at least until a decision is reached by whoever this person is, okay? So that can be kept confidential if requested. Personnel discipline records ordinarily exempt from disclosure. Test questions, scoring keys for obvious reasons. Real estate appraisal information prior to acquisition. Names and signatures of employees relating to some union activities. All of these you're like, yeah, I see that. Yeah, that makes sense. This one I like. I haven't seen it used yet, but I'd like to before I retire. Certain information relating to archaeological sites or threatened or endangered species. I like that scenario that you're going to build a new building and you go out and start excavating and you find a dinosaur bone, dinosaur skeleton. Ooh, I like that one. But there are agencies who want to know about that, but for obvious reasons, you don't tell the public, otherwise it's going to be, mayhem. So, and same if you find like Native American artifacts or something that where it makes sense to keep it on the down low. Threatened and endangered species. We had somebody at our last session who was with the Department of Agriculture, which has a role with soil and water conservation districts, and that's something they deal with, and that protecting native species or endangered species, et cetera, that might be something that applies to them. And then somebody, when I was talking about this in another session, they said, well, and nobody's ever going to be able to build on that site. You know that, right? It's like, well, yeah, it's probably true. Okay, and then this one is, we saw this parallel in the executive session laws. If the records pertain to programs relating to the security of our infrastructure, you have blueprints or you have a security system plan or, map or, schematic or something. Those are records that we would not disclose and we keep them confidential for public safety reasons. Same with operational plans, like in the event of an emergency, here's where you can find the bunker where we're all going to be hiding. You don't get to have to disclose that if somebody requests it. All right. Those are just some representative samples of things that are exempt from disclosure. This is not all of them, but these are the ones you're most likely to encounter. When in doubt, ask your lawyer. You might get weird requests periodically. Yes. Go ahead.
Would you ever redact addresses, phone numbers, that type of thing?
Almost always.
So what
Yes.
about the audio part? Do you go through and,
Well, are you talking about in your meeting minutes, for example?
or public, I know, our county commissions, you have to give your name, address, and phone number. So it's
Oh.
out there in the public anyway, but.
Yeah, you wouldn't redact that from the records. If it's being talked about in a public meeting, you've given away the farm. I mean, you're going to get to claim confidentiality, but in that example, no, you wouldn't. But in the other examples we gave, like the, customer information, you would almost always redact that personal stuff. Employee information, you might disclose, as we talked about before, the position, the salary, the benefits, that's all public information. And even the person's name who's in that position, but anything else about them is going to be not disclosed. Yeah. Yep.
Directors, are they subject to records without a request?
When you say directors, you mean members of your board?
Yes.
Very rarely. Almost always, these confidential things don't apply to your elected or appointed board members.
So they could ask for a copy of minutes.
Oh, I thought you meant records about them. No, records about them are almost always publicly disclosable. They don't have the same protections that employees do because they're elected officials. But they don't have, remember we talked early on about that whole micromanagement problem? Individual board members don't have access to records, public records, unless the board has authorized it, and then they do. If they want a record and they want to request it and they don't have board authorization, they are treated like any other member of the public. If it's disclosable, they can get it, and if there's a fee, they have to pay the fee. All right, they're treated like anybody else. And some of them will get, I've dealt with board members who are outraged. How dare you tell me that? I'm on the board. It's like, well, yeah, but the board didn't say you could do that, so.
It goes back to you're a citizen when you're not.
Exactly. Without the rest of the board, you are just one person and you have the same rights as any other one person. Okay, all right. So that's the exemptions from disclosure. Good examples of exemptions from disclosure. We're going to talk about storage and retention. Okay, real basic stuff that there is a department at the state level, Oregon State Archivist. We've been hearing a lot about the Federal Archives Office. Well, there is a counterpart in the state level, the state archives. There is an archivist. That person's job is to adopt rules and regulations relating to the preservation and disclosure and retention of public records. And so the archivist does that through administrative rules. And if you went and looked up the administrative rules, I don't cite them here, but in summary, when they talk about retaining your public records, here's what you're supposed to be doing. You store them in secure fire-resistant structures. Temperature and humidity to ensure optimum longevity, adequate light and access to permit retrieval, adequate ventilation and protection against insects or mold, protected from water damage and not placed on the floor. Are you all doing that? Some of you are like, well, yes, we are. Some of you are like, no. Yep.
No, well, as far as, I look at that for public records, for like your meeting stuff, I have those records. They're in my home.
I love you guys. I actually have told, I do this, I like this when I'm teaching this because what this makes me laugh a bit because some of you are doing it and good on you. We did have somebody at one of our sessions who's like at one of the wildfires, like last summer or, all of their public records wiped out. And it wasn't because they were negligent. It was just because it was a heck of a fire, so, and they're trying to reconstruct that now. But if you have the ability to do all this stuff, then do it. However, what I find interesting about this is that it is not uncommon in my experience, we've been doing this for a while, where somebody will call me up and it's usually a little district and many of you are little districts and they're awful cute. And they'll have some question, something that I need to opine on, and I'll ask for something like, could you send me a copy of your rules and regulations ordinance? And I'm on the phone and there's like this cheap crickets. And I'll be like, and they'll say something like, where would that be? And I did, well, where do you keep your public records? And they'll say something cute, like, well, Bob was the chair of the board for 25 years and he had them in his garage and he always took care of mine. And he's dead. He's been dead since I don't know. And you get these, there's very funny stories, they're cute and I get it. But so if you're doing any of this, like if you're keeping your records like fine wine, you are doing well. I would be happy if you know where they are. That would be helpful a lot. You are ahead of the game. So the point being, it's okay that you store them, that you keep them, okay, but they are public records and they have to be maintained like public records. And the idea being that you have to do all this stuff.
Well, it's the fire resistant structure in my house. I mean, it's possible fire would burn it down. I mean, there's only so much they can do, right?
You're asking me? What do you think?
Well,
You know, again, I advise, okay, I tell you what the law says. And then if you have questions, talk to the district's lawyer, but I'm telling you what the law tells you you're supposed to be doing, okay? The whole point of these is these are not your records. They're historic records. Many of them have to be retained forever. So the responsibility you have is to maintain them to the best of your ability, store them to keep them safe. And there you go. Protect them from floods. Common things, back when we had the floods in what, 94 was it? We had big flooding in the Portland area. The city of Oregon City lost a bunch of stuff to flood. We lose things to fire. In the old cowboy times, the number of things that were lost to fire, I mean, there's so many historic records that were gone because the building burned down. It was before we had sprinklers and, you know, fireproof structures. So I'm telling you, this is best practices. Do what you can with it, okay?
Is a fire resistant structure, would a fire resistant safe or fire resistant file cabinet, would that qualify?
In my opinion, yes, that counts. As you know, and again, there's going to come a point when fire is going to melt it. But the idea being that your average garden variety fire, it should be protected from that. Yeah. Okay. The Oregon State Archivist offers certain services to help you preserve your documents. You can talk to the State Archives Office about what services they offer. My understanding is that they do charge for many of them, but you can talk to them about that. Among other things, what they will do is help you archive them in a way that is protected and accessible. One of the ways that they will do that is as I understand, they still do this, put them on microfilm, which sounds, you know, remember microfiche in the school library, and, you know, they apparently still do it that way. The argument being that that electronic storage is lovely, but technology tends to get moved beyond that. And then we have documents we can't access anymore because we don't have the technology to do it. So there are old fashioned ways to preserve them so that we will always be able to get to them. And the archivist can help you with that. And you should always have a backup system for your electronic records, some sort of backup system. Store it off the premises.
Can you have your public records as digital only, or are you gonna, is there somewhere?
Yeah, it's okay to, yeah.
Meeting minutes are half paper and half digital.
Perfectly okay electronically. The issue is going to be, can you reproduce it if needed? Sure. And can people get to it if needed?
Okay.
And beyond that, storing things in the cloud anymore is kind of, it seems to be a relatively safe thing to do. It's easy to access them if you have a hacker, but people can open your mail too. So, you know, okay. Okay, so that's storage. All right, do your best. Just be aware that you're supposed to be taking care of them. When we talk about retention, this came up at least once already. How long do you keep a public record? And I can tell you, whenever somebody asks me that, usually because I'll say, I don't know, but I know how to look it up. And I'll tell you how to look it up because you can. The archivist, the Oregon State Archivist, is responsible for putting together retention schedules. This is the county and special district retention schedule. This is referenced in one of the final slides. And you'll see how tiny this print is? Can you witness for me how tiny that is? It is all of this, all right? So I printed this out a few years ago. I don't know if it's changed. I don't care because I'm not going to print it out again. But I highlighted a few examples. So how long you retain a record depends on the record. So the first thing you have to do is look, well, what type of record is this? And then you go to your thing here and it says, for example, contracts, leases, and agreements. All right, we all have those. And then it goes on to explain what they mean by all that. Minimum retention, construction contract records 10 years after substantial completion. Collective bargaining contract records are permanent. Other contracts, leases, and agreements 6 years after expiration. So it's very content specific. Intergovernmental agreements, if they are significant and historic, they're permanent. If they're not, then 6 years after expiration. I always think that's funny. I'm like, one side thinks this is a significant agreement. The other side is, well, no, it's not. But it's significant to me. Meeting minutes or meeting records, minimum retention, minutes, agendas, resolutions, indexes, and exhibits, permanent. Retain executive session minutes 10 years. Audio or visual recordings 1 year after minutes prepared and approved. So that's what I was saying, that you have to keep the recording for a year after you have the final copy done, but they're both public records and you have to retain them. The permanent ones are permanent. The other ones can be destroyed after a certain amount of time. So that's I won't go through any more of those. You're welcome to look at them if you want to, but you can look these up. I had a client recently call and say, you should have SDAO pay you to develop recommendations for retention of records. And why would I do that? But they could pay me if they want to, and I'll do it. With that said, I think it'd be a waste of time, because what I would do is tell them to go look it up, because you can. It's all available online. Okay, so before you dispose of records, you're supposed to see, have you kept them the requisite amount of time?
You can meet or exceed, you could develop policy internally that extends how long you keep stuff.
Exactly. And occasionally, I mean, somebody who's just really good at this, that's just their thing, is record keeping, and they tend to have really wonderful files. We'll say, destroy date, or keep until whatever, or these are permanent. It'll be clear just looking at them. I love those people, because I am not that way. So if they do that for you, great. Okay. Yes.
So when we're reading our agenda,
Mhm.
Our president reads that the meeting minutes will be recorded and kept for 60 months. And that was.
Why does your person do that?
That's, I'm curious after you just said. Permanent.
That's interesting. You don't have that option to decide how long to keep them. It's mandated in the law. So we might want to revisit that and figure out where that came from.
Yeah, that's been in place since before
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah, and sometimes we do things because we've always done them, and then we find out that we weren't supposed to be always doing them. But, there might be a reason that I don't know about, but I'd look into that. Look into that. My tip to you, my free legal tip, look into that. You might want to talk to a lawyer. Okay, a few recent law changes that you should be aware of. By recent, again, we were talking at the break about, I know this happened to many of us. It certainly happened to me. Is since we went into the pandemic, time has taken on a whole weird quality where it might have been last year and it might have been 20 years ago. It might have been yesterday. I don't know. There's some sense that it happened, but I'm not sure exactly when. Okay, so I put in here stuff that started to happen pre-pandemic and then stuff that continued to happen during the pandemic. But these were 2017 laws that don't really affect you directly, but they will indirectly. 2017 was when the legislature really started to address public records changes. And that apparently there's a lot of grousing from media and others that these laws are problematic and we need to work on them. So there were 3 bodies that were created at that time. The Public Records Advocates Office was created. That's this one down here. And that is a state employee, and his or her job is to arbitrate disputes about public records. That's the whole reason it was created. Primarily for state agencies, but my understanding is it's available for you guys if you ask. So that's interesting to know that. There also was a 4-member public records subcommittee, the Legislative Council Committee. Their job is to look into public records changes and advise the legislature on what to do. And then this one, it also established a 15-member Oregon Sunshine Committee, which consists of a bunch of representatives of government and representatives of media and representatives of public interest groups and a few legislators. And they have a 10-year mandate to look at all of the exemptions to public records law and to make recommendations to the legislature on things that can be gotten rid of or things that can be consolidated. And do we need 500 exemptions? And, so you look at all those. And the reason why I know something about that is because guess who represents special districts on the Oregon Sunshine Committee? Maybe me. It is a slog, let me tell you. And we are trying to get our heads around it. The pandemic didn't help because we had the long stretch where we didn't meet at all. We're back to meeting again every other month. And one of the challenges we're finding is that as we make recommendations, we deliver reports to the legislature, and we say, we recommend that this be eliminated in whatever recommendations we're making. And in the meantime, the legislature is creating a whole bunch of new exemptions. So this job may never end. I won't be doing it forever, but it's like bailing out the boat while the water continues to come in. Okay, so that's happening at the legislature level. There also was a change in 2021. The original public records advocate, who was lovely, I liked her, she was very bright. She ran into some sort of mystery conflict with the governor, who at that time was her supervisor. The decision was made to make that an independent office, so the governor does not oversee that position anymore. So that was done by legislation. A couple of other new exemptions, like I was saying, they keep creating new ones. There's one dealing with people with intellectual or developmental disabilities living in foster or group homes. One dealing with minors who obtain hunting or fishing licenses. And this one, which is timely in 2022, which I think is important. Election workers can request the county clerk to exempt their residential address from public disclosure. Our election workers should not have to endure threats to the work, to their beings by virtue of the work that they do. That one makes me mad. But that's a new law in Oregon that we dealt with. Okay, so that was public records. Any questions about public records before we wrap up this puppy?
Sorry,
That's all
I
right.
come to these more annual and less questions.
Please come.
I'm just curious, like, I don't want to break the law, but what are the consequences of not retaining records properly?
For the most part, destroying a public record is a misdemeanor. So if you are responsible for destroying it, you can be fined. I believe it's up to $1,000 or up to 1 year in jail. Okay. Certain records, like the records relating to the lottery, or certain ones which you don't have anything to do with, that's a felony. You know, and if you take them away and obstruct justice in the process of taking them away, which has been in the news, that can also be a felony. But for the most part, it's a misdemeanor. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's a misdemeanor. Okay.
It's if you like purposely did it.
Exactly. And it's like with any crime, there has to be intent. If you're just sloppy about it, then you'll just get embarrassed in the newspaper that you are not properly keeping track of your records. Okay. All right. I'm going to go through, I just kind of, this is always interesting to me. I kind of, before we do this road tour, I like to just kind of canvass what new laws are out there for special districts. There's one that I haven't talked about, which isn't law yet, but something to watch for, because one of SDAO's lobbyists is telling me this is still an active conversation. There is a possibility that the legislature may put the Ethics Commission in charge of enforcing all public meetings laws, not just executive sessions, but all of them. So I don't have happy feelings about that, but something to watch for. It's possible that any violation of a public meetings law could become an ethics violation and be enforced in that way. Hasn't happened yet, going to be talked about. There are also continued conversations about the public records law and how to manage that. So watch for more changes there. But the ones that have actually passed recently, which affect not all of you collectively, but some of you, counties get a certain amount of, if they're in an area where there's like federal timberland, the counties get a certain amount of the revenue from that, and they're supposed to use it for roads, for improving roads. There is a specific law that was passed that enables the county to pass some of that on to local road districts that are special districts. So they're able to do that. So that's a good thing for road districts if they can get some of that cash. All elected officials are now mandatory reporters of child abuse and elder abuse. Okay, many of us are already in that camp. If you're a medical provider or a lawyer or a teacher, you're already required. But if by virtue of being an elected official, you are now a mandatory reporter.
Excuse me, is that regardless of your geographic location?
Yes, statewide. This one, we had an interesting conversation at one of our trainings from some of the fire people who were involved in this. The fire people, I mean, fire district representatives. The public official overseeing a response to wildfire or other natural disaster is now required to give access to the media. Apparently that was an issue. The media wants access, and for good reasons. The incident commander is like, I think not. And anyway, there's now a law that says they have to require it, the access, but the incident commander has to, is in charge and gets to decide how it can be done and safely and not interfering with the, response, et cetera. This top one actually benefits the port of Hood River specifically. They have been in process of trying to build a new toll bridge across the Columbia. The other side of the Columbia is what? Washington. So they needed legislation that would create a bi-state commission so that the two of them can coordinate on how to do all that. So they were successful in getting that passed in 2022. This one, the next one after that deals with, for workers' compensation purposes, if you are a paid firefighter, not volunteers, paid firefighters, there is now a presumption that if you have bladder cancer or a female reproductive system cancer of some kind, that will be covered under your workers' comp, because it's assumed that that was caused at least in part by the exposures that you had fighting fires. I like that one. Women fight fires too. I think that's good that that's there. You could think about it how you like, but I like it. This one, the State Department of Administrative Services now has been authorized to give grants to counties and nonprofit entities if they are collectively working to come up with solutions to homelessness. The idea being, we have a problem, it needs a cooperative effort, and we're going to help provide some grant funding to facilitate that. And then there was this is a housekeeping one. It is possible for special districts to submit initiative petitions to the voters, and there was some cleanup there on trying to clarify those requirements. It is a unnecessarily complicated in my opinion, but attempts are being made. Okay, that's the new laws that I'm aware of that might be interesting to you. And then George and I are going to wrap this up, and it is now 3:51. Gosh, we've got this down to a science.
You've got this down. You've got this down. How about the job she did for us today? Huh?
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I listen to the new laws every day intently as she goes over them. But today, the one about elder abuse really hit. Huh. If I was abused today at all. You guys are now
You have no idea.
You guys are now mandatory reporters. All right, we're gonna go real quick on this one. I appreciate that. You have as being a member of special districts, being a member of our insurance program, you have a service available to you that I hope you never have to take advantage of, but I just want to go over real quickly. And that is our SDIS pre-loss legal program. Any of you at any time, if you are served with an actual lawsuit notice, somebody taps on your door and asks who you are and hands you an official document, says congratulations, you've been served. If you think your district, you feel like your district's had a bad day and you may have a suit coming your way, but we've had dogs fall into open manholes, and that was not a good day for the dog. And the district let us know. But call our 1-800 number, ask for our pre-loss legal program. You've had that kind of aw shucks day. Talk to our people. They will give you some advice and tell you whether they think, yep, you've had a bad day. Let's get some facts, or no, hey, don't just take some normal facts down and let's move on. It's a great program. What that does for you as a district, that if you do get a claim filed against you and there is some kind of an award, it reduces your deductible. So it's a great thing to use. You may go from like a $25,000 deductible to a $5,000 deductible, depending on the actions you took with the advice you got from our pre-loss legal people. That doesn't replace your internal policies, your internal legal advisors. Doesn't replace any of that, but definitely something that you want to take advantage of. Can I have one more click? 2 more clicks. We have in the back of your handouts, Eileen's put together for us some reference material. She's talked about a lot of this stuff throughout the day. Most of it now is available online. We encourage you to use it. I think it was Eileen that said that she's noticed that people are actually now going online and reading some documents even before they call her, just to make sure they're getting some definition of a law maybe before they even reach out to her. It can make it easier. So that stuff is available to you. I think that's all I have. Eileen, do you have anything else? Did I forget something?
Well, by the way, thank you all for hanging in there. Appreciate the, even during the bathroom crisis.
Yeah.
We all survived that. I was telling Kaylee at the break that it was convenient that most of our attendees today are virtual, so they didn't have to suffer like you did. So thanks for being here. And I also want you to know you are doing good work. You may find it, people might not be telling you that, but I see you, I work with you guys every day, or people like you, and you are doing good work. So I want you to take heart And the fact that you are here and are conscientious about the work that you do is very much appreciated.
I want to reinforce that last part, well, all of it, but the last part mainly, the fact you came today, I'm really proud of you folks. The ones that are out there virtually, I think we could have possibly 80 some out there virtually, off and on throughout the day and on mostly. We really appreciate that. It's good for your district. I definitely agree with her words. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation form. Kaylee has the box back there you can drop your name tag into. And handouts are all yours. If you'd like to take a set of handouts for somebody that in your district that you know would utilize them, we have a few extras, correct? All right. Any questions from any of you? Anything virtually questionable out there? Kaylee?
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Hey, drive carefully. Have a nice weekend. Hey, Labor Day weekend coming up. And by the way, drive carefully. If you're going southwest, it appears to be pretty smoky out there. I'm